Chapter 274. Qi Group is not considered a large conglomerate in China. After all, many companies are moving towards China, and there are lots of companies with high market values in China. Look at the Forbes list. All the banks in China are listed at the top of the list. Apart from these public companies, let's just talk about Tencent, Alibaba, Chanda, and so on. Their market value was easily tens of billions of dollars. And the founders who owned a lot of shares naturally had a high share of the shares. There was no telling how much they made every year, but they were definitely worth at least $18 billion in US dollars. The Qi Group's main business projects in the country were real estate and technology projects. Real estate was the foundation of Qi Li's father's business. He was originally a businessman. Later, when he had some money, he started from real estate speculation. Then, he developed a residential area outside the third ring road of the capital. He used more than 10 years to turn from a contractor to a tycoon. Then he raised funds, went public, and established the Qi Group. As for the technology projects, most of them are venture capital and angel funds. Of course, the returns are also good. After decades of development by Qi Li's father, Qi Group's market value is 17.2 billion renminbi when Qi Li's father was at his peak. The Qi family owns 47.3% of the shares, and it is not an exaggeration to say that Qi Group is a family business. But after Qi Li's father died, the shares dropped to 8.1 billion renminbi, and more than half of the company's assets disappeared. In the past year, with Qi Li's help, Qi Group's assets returned to 16.2 billion renminbi. Although it is still far from its peak, it is not considered a first-tier conglomerate in Bing City, let alone in Beijing. After all, doing business is like sailing against the current. If you do not move forward, you will fall behind. In fact, Qi Li did not tell Jiang Hai that the real estate business in China is not doing well. The prices of the houses in the city have not dropped, and there is no need to worry about selling them. But it is very difficult to develop them. If the houses are too far away from the city, there will be no profits even if they develop them. This is because the houses are not selling well now. So now Qi Li was forced to change her style. In the past year, she had put more energy into business and technology investments. The returns were quite good. Now Qi Enterprise was mainly relying on these things to advance. But these things were not real. Technology was like virtual currency. No matter how high it was, if it burst one day, it would be over. Qi Li, who had lived in the US for a period of time, was very clear about the networking and IT businesses. These businesses could make money quickly, but go bankrupt even faster. For example, there was a factory in the United States that specialized in producing mobile phone screens. Later, they signed a supply contract with Apple. Instantly, the company's stock price rose from a few dollars to dozens of dollars. At its peak, it even rose to hundreds of dollars. This company instantly entered the eyes of the public. However, before this company could make money, the company had already started to make money. Apple's new products did not use the screens produced by this company. Then this company went bankrupt immediately. So Qi Li was very clear about these things. Investing money in these things will bring a lot of returns. But if it is not done well, it is easy to fail miserably. This is something she absolutely does not want to see. Compared to these superficial things, she valued the business more. In other words, if there is something in the business, it will make people feel more assured. Among all the businesses, the easiest way to make money was selling clothes. But Qi Enterprise will not deal with ordinary small brands. As for the big brands, they have their own fashion stores and do not need Qi Enterprise to act as their agent. Clothes are not available. Recently, the country is changing the price of housing, and they can't do well. Even if they want to act as an agent for cars, they do not have the ability to do so. Then only food is left. It is said that food is the most important thing for people. Before coming to Jiang Hai's place, Qi Li had already considered whether she should get involved in the food and beverage industry. Because of the recent policies in the country, high-end hotels cannot sell alcohol and so on. However, there was still a market for some high-end Western restaurants, especially when ordinary people were earning more and more. A stylish restaurant is indeed a good place to make money. At the same time, Chi Enterprise is actually in the food and beverage industry. At the same time, she can make money and attack them at the same time to avenge her father. This is a good way to kill two birds with one stone. However, the catering business was not something that could be done and when it came to official matters, it was easy for them to settle it. The Chi family had been in Beijing for so many years and could be considered to have deep roots. It was also easy for them to solve the problem of the shops. After all, their company had a lot of shops in their hands. But it is a little troublesome to find the origin of the raw materials. It is very difficult to sell domestic products at a high price now, and the foreign products are basically divided up by the big food and beverage companies. It is not so easy to find new ones now. So before coming out this time, Chile has also been thinking about this problem, but there is no solution. She came to Jiang Hai's place purely to relieve her boredom. At the same time, she made a deal with Jiang Hai and told him about her and Jiang Hai. But she accidentally found that Jiang Hai's beef is the best in the world. Originally, she just wanted to help Jiang Hai and help him get more money from Prawalton. That is why she came to learn about Jiang Hai's beef. This is also a kind of goodwill to him. After all, Jiang Hai's beef is raised in the East Coast. It is a little troublesome to transport it back. But as she got to know more, she found that Jiang Hai's beef is indeed the best. And Jiang Hai is also raising fish. Not only cod, but also other fish, even salmon and lobsters. If these fish are transported back to the country, her restaurant will be very successful. Then, she estimated that her restaurant would definitely be able to make a name for itself. That was what she was most excited about. But when she thought about the price of Jiang Hai's beef, she can't help but hesitate. It is too expensive. If the shipping cost was included, a pound of steak would cost almost 3,000 renminbi. Adding the cost of water, electricity, taxes, labor, and so on, she would not even be able to recoup the cost of a half-pound steak if she did not sell it for more than 2,000 renminbi. But 2,000 yuan for a steak, although the taste is guaranteed, how many people are willing to spend this money to eat it? This is also the most troublesome thing for her now, but she is really reluctant to give up. And most importantly, Jiang Hai doesn't kill the cows. There are only about 12,000 bulls. Now that 2,000 bulls have been sold, there are still 10,000 bulls. If she doesn't want them, then she can be sure that Prawalton will not give up these bulls. If she wants them again, she will have to wait another year. I have a headache. Rubbing her temples, Chile murmured in a low voice. The assistant who has been sitting next to her naturally knows what project her boss is following up on recently. In fact, in her opinion, Jiang Hai's food is really delicious. She has been traveling extensively with Chile in China. It can be said that she had seen and eaten all kinds of delicacies. But when she came to Jiang Hai's side, she suddenly found that the things she used to think were delicious tasted wrong. Not to mention the steak. After all, it was the steak that the young master of Walmart had taken a fancy to. Just the fish, lobster, and abalones have a taste that she has never eaten before. The fresh and sweet taste of the deep sea and cold water really made her a little overwhelmed. It is really delicious. If she can feel this way, then the foodies in China will not be bad. It can be said that as long as these things are sent back to China, it will be no problem to sell them at a high price. However, she also knows what Chile is worried about. The transportation is too expensive, too far, and too high. It is really a bit speechless. They sat on the lawn for the whole afternoon. When the sun set in the west and Philemon and Belle were about to go back with their cattle, the two women came back to their senses. I have decided, I want to give it a try. Looking at the blue sky in the distance, Chile seemed to be talking to her assistant beside her, but also seemed to be talking to herself. She nodded with a serious face. Her voice was not loud, but it was unusually steady. But the price? Hearing Chile say that she wants to give it a try, the assistant is a little worried. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. If we let go of this opportunity, then we can only wait for next year. If Jiang Hai's beef is made famous by Walmart, even if there is some affection between Jiang Hai and me, it will not be easy to get a certain share. The most important thing is that when the time comes, we will not be the only family to sell this kind of beef in the country. Standing up, Chili casually patted the grass and leaves on her butt, and her eyes flashed with a trace of firmness. President Chi, as long as it is your decision, I will faithfully carry it out. Seeing that Chili has made up her mind, the assistant naturally knew that this is the time to show her determination. So she stood up and said with a serious face. Then the two returned to Jiang Hai's villa. When they returned to the villa, they found that Walton and Selena Gomez had already returned. Of course, the most important thing was Jiang Hai, and Jiang Hai had already prepared dinner. In Jiang Hai's manner, there was never a shortage of delicious food. Tonight he made dinner. Steak was naturally the main dish. In addition to steak, there was also a pot of beef stew. Seafood was naturally indispensable. 10 fried cod sticks, a large bowl of cheddar soup, Arctic sweet shrimp, braised abalone. Although there was no lobster from yesterday, because Jiang Hai did not have time to catch it today, these dishes were naturally very sumptuous. On the other side, Chili's assistant, after sitting at the table, did not stop using her mobile phone. It seemed that she was also showing off in her circle of friends. However, in addition to her, it seemed that the atmosphere at the dinner table today was even more strange. Chapter 275. Jiang Hai, I have something to tell you. After a dull dinner, Walton didn't mention the beef to Jiang Hai today, and Jiang Hai didn't take the initiative to talk about it. But after Walton left, Jiang Hai was preparing to clean up the remaining plates and bowls, when Chili walked into the kitchen and looked at Jiang Hai and said, "What's the matter?" While cleaning up the remaining dishes, Jiang Hai asked Chili, "Can you leave some of your beef for me?" Looking at Jiang Hai, Chili said with some embarrassment. Last night, she was still bargaining with Jiang Hai, but she didn't expect that one day later, she changed her mind. She changed from a person who wanted to make money for Jiang Hai to a person who wants to make money for Jiang Hai. The change is really big. Okay, you can take as much as you want, but how much can you eat? Is it for your mother? I remember that the beef I gave your mother last time was the best. Hearing Chili's words, Jiang Hai thought she was embarrassed to take some back. Although he and Chili have a relationship, Jiang Hai is not so stingy that he can't even bear to part with some beef. So he said without raising his head, "No, not a small amount and not for me to eat. You also know that our Chi group is mainly in the real estate business. But recently, the domestic real estate business has not been good. So we changed our business to investing in the electronics industry. But this thing is not a real business after all. There are too many bubbles in it, and I am a little worried. So I recently had an idea, and that is to invest in the restaurant industry." Looking at Jiang Hai, Chili began to talk. She is indeed a good businessman, and can also be said to be a good politician. When she began to talk, her endless enthusiasm was indeed like a female robber. The trace of hesitation just now has completely disappeared at this time, and she began to talk to Jiang Hai about her philosophy. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai's hands, which were originally busy, stopped and looked at her with some surprise. "You mean you want to buy beef from me? To be honest, I don't think your choice is right. After all, the price of my beef is a little, oh no, it is very high, and it is really difficult for ordinary people to accept." Looking at Chili in front of him, Jiang Hai hesitated for a moment and said softly, "Business is business, feelings are feelings, and Jiang Hai and Chili don't have any feelings for each other. Originally, their identities were more like enemies. It was good enough that he didn't raise the price, and it was impossible for her to let him get a discount. Of course I know that. The price is not lower than yours. I bought it at the same price as Walton. You don't think that I spent so much effort to open a Western restaurant just to cater to the middle and low-end consumers, do you? My target has been the rich since the beginning. For the average consumer, 2,000 renminbi for a steak is hard to accept. But for the rich or those who like to show off, it's not particularly expensive." Looking at Jiang Hai, Chili also stared at him. From the beginning, the so-called pattern between the two was different. After all, Jiang Hai was just a loser in China. Although now he is abroad and has become a rich man. In fact, he is more like a loser. Some people say that a rich man can't be rich for more than 3 generations, because the people who are really rich for more than 3 generations are the family. Although Qi Li is not from a family and has not been rich for more than 3 generations, it doesn't prevent her from fixing her eyes on those families. Such a price, except for those families, only the nouveau riche who likes to pretend can accept it. Seeing Qi Li so serious, Jiang Hai didn't say anything and thought for a moment. Since you have decided, I can give you a share of 1,000 head, but the transportation fee is not included in the meat. You need to rent a warehouse in Boston and find a way to get the meat back. It's up to you whether you want to go by air or by sea. Now he can still squeeze out 1,000 head of beef, and it doesn't matter if he gives it to Qi Li. After all, Prawalton hasn't ordered how many head of beef she has. In fact, Jiang Hai understands why Prawalton is so calm and not in a hurry. In fact, it is very simple. Jiang Hai's beef is too expensive. Now in the United States, there are only a few people who can afford to buy all his beef. And Jiang Hai just participated in the New York State Beef Cattle Show in the east of the United States, and his name hasn't become famous yet. There won't be a large number of suppliers, so she has a certain opportunity. She has been playing these 2 days and didn't talk to Jiang Hai about the price. It's not that she doesn't want to talk to him, but she is waiting for Jiang Hai to be unable to hold back. Although in terms of the final transaction price, she would definitely not let Jiang Hai suffer a loss, but cooperation was similar to talking about a partner. There is always one person who is strong, and the other person who is weak. Prawalton wants to be the strong one. Now Jiang Hai gave 1,000 head of beef to Qi Li, which is actually a hint to Prawalton that his beef can be sold. If you really don't talk about the price, then it will really have nothing to do with her. 1,000 head of beef. That's great, but we may not be able to buy so many at once. Hearing Jiang Hai give her 1,000 head of beef so quickly, Qi Li, who has prepared a lot of excuses, is stunned first, and then she is ecstatic. Originally, she thought that it wouldn't be easy to get some beef from Jiang Hai's hands. But unexpectedly, Jiang Hai is more decisive than she thought. 1,000 head of beef is enough to deal with the Western restaurant she is going to open. If the quality of the beef is really the same as the beef she has eaten in the past 2 days, it will be difficult for her restaurant not to be popular. Seeing Qi Li agree, Jiang Hai also waved his hand. As long as the price is not a problem, it is not a problem. This is not a problem. Beef will not taste good after it is frozen. If you want to eat it, you have to eat it cold. The contract is for half a year. Within half a year, you can slaughter it many times, and you can decide the number of times. In the end, you will be done with 1,000 head of beef. For beef, many slaughterhouses slaughtered beef in batches and then froze it. However, although frozen beef wouldn't spoil, it definitely wouldn't taste as good as fresh beef. Really good beef was fresh and cold, just like some expensive fish. If it was fresh and cold, it wouldn't be a problem even if it was kept for 10 days or half a month. It will be the same as when it is alive. But if it is cold, it must be frozen immediately if it is not eaten. Otherwise it will spoil. Jiang Hai's beef is the same. After killing the beef here, it must be immediately put on ice and then sent back to China. It will take 2 days to go back and forth, and it is just right to divide it into half a month to slaughter it. No problem, we can sign the contract. Seeing Jiang Hai agree, Qi Li's eyes lit up. After half a year of growth, the bulls in Jiang Hai's restaurant have basically grown to their largest state, which is 750 kilograms. According to the meat yield of 65%, it is nearly 1,000 kilograms. Out of the 1,000 kilograms, half a kilogram of steak can be made, which is only 2,000 yuan in total. Besides, in a restaurant there is more than just steak. There are about 1,200 servings. If she opens a restaurant, she will open more than one. If all her restaurants in the food and beverage industry couldn't consume 5,000 pounds of beef a day, then there was no point in her opening a restaurant. Not to mention impacting the family's original market. Even in the capital's food and beverage industry, it probably wouldn't make any waves. Hearing Qi Li's words, Jiang Hai thought for a while and nodded. Okay, it's a deal. To be honest, he didn't really want to sell the beef cattle to Qi Li. After all, 1,000 bulls is not a small amount. Jianghai's beef cattle can be sold for more than 100,000 yuan per head, and 1,000 of them will be more than 100 million yuan. If it was converted into RMB, it would be 700 to 800 million. This was a huge amount of pressure for Qili. However, Qili is obviously ready to deal with the pressure. After Jianghai agreed, she quickly went upstairs and contacted the people in her company to discuss the purchase of Jianghai's beef. First of all, they need a transport plane. They can't afford it, but they can rent it. Secondly, it is the problem of the price. However, it has nothing to do with Qili, and the professionals will discuss it. The next morning, Qili came to Jianghai with the contract she made overnight. Prawalton is the first one to be stunned. Just as Jianghai thought, Prawalton came with the idea that the goods are there. But she didn't expect Qili to interfere. Jiang, this is different from the number you told me. How can you sell 1,000 bulls to her without permission? Looking at the contract Qili brought over, Prawalton's face is gloomy. She has prepared the money this time. She was waiting for Jianghai to give up, so that she can sign a contract with him. However, she didn't expect that someone would come out of nowhere. First of all, you're mistaken about one thing. This is my cow, not yours. Secondly, this is my thing. Naturally, I can sell it to whoever I want. You haven't said that you want it, and you haven't said that you don't want it. I can't possibly refuse someone who comes to me with real money just to wait for you. Jianghai glanced at Prawalton casually and signed his name on the contract Qili brought over. Jianghai also showed this contract to Moses Adams, and the obligations of both parties are clearly stated in it. Seeing Jianghai give away 1,000 bulls just like that, Prawalton is really anxious this time. Okay, 1,000 bulls it is. I'll take the rest. Prawalton said word by word as she slammed her hands on the table in front of Jianghai. It is obvious that she is not in a good mood now. Don't you want to see the bulls? We haven't talked about the price yet. Hearing her words, Jianghai looked at her with some surprise. He really doesn't understand this woman. Prawalton just smiled after hearing Jianghai's words. Does Jianghai really think that he is playing these days? Too naive. Chapter 276. Tut 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 tut. The sound of a motor could be heard in the waters of the Jianghai fishing ground. At this time, a boat was like an arrow that had been released from a bow, quickly cutting through the waves and advancing into the depths of the sea. At this moment, Jianghai was sitting in the pilot's seat. He wore a pair of sunglasses and looked into the distance while enjoying the sea breeze. At this moment, there were no humans by his side, only some animals. Boom 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 boom. Although it was not her first time out at sea, Xiaobai was still very afraid of the ocean. In fact, dogs were afraid of heights and water. Of course, dogs could swim, but that did not mean that they liked water. There were some dogs that liked water, but most of them were like Xiaobai. They didn't like water. That's enough, your voice is louder than the engine. Jianghai patted Little White's head and said with a smile. But sometimes, fear wasn't something that could be understood just by talking about it. Hearing Jianghai's words, Xiaobai looked at Jianghai pitifully. It tried its best not to cry out, but it still stayed far away from the boat. If water splashed over, it would run away immediately. Looking at it, it continued to lie lazily in the distance. However, its raised eyes and ears meant that it didn't like water either. Unlike them, Daiteeth and Qiuqiu seemed to like this place very much. Qiuqiu was currently standing at the bow of the ship, shedding its feathers. Although it was not as majestic as an adult bald eagle, it was somewhat similar. Occasionally, it would try to spread its wings, but its claws would not loosen no matter what. Jianghai was not worried about this. The bald-headed sea eagle's growth cycle was very long. Generally speaking, it would take 4 months for the hatchling to grow into a young bird. The young birds had to be taught for another 3 months before they could fly and leave Rome to live alone. Although Jianghai's Qiuqiu was about the same age, it was congenitally deficient when it was young. Although it had Jianghai's qi as its bones to make up for its injuries, it still couldn't fly yet. It needed to be trained slowly, but at this moment, it had shown its yearning for the sky, so Jianghai didn't have to worry about it. As for the other one that wasn't afraid of water, it was Bucktooth. This guy was currently sitting in front of the dashboard of Jiang Hai's cabin. He was watching Jiang Hai drive the ship while eating the grass that Daliana had given him before they set sail. He was very calm. Looking at the appearance of his pets, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. He had been busy these past few days. 10 days have passed since Qi Li and the others arrived. The first day was the day they arrived. The second day was the Poseidon ceremony. On the third day, after Jiang Hai and Qi Li signed a contract, Prawalton and Jiang Hai signed a contract on the fourth day. The price of the contract was also quite good. The price of the two was the same. Premium A-grade beef. If it was Japanese 5A grade beef, which accounted for more than half of the premium A-grade beef, the price would be $395 per pound. If it was less than half, the price would be $380 per pound. The price of the other beef was the same as Prawalton's original price. After signing the contract, the cattle raised in Jiang Hai's manor were basically sold out. The rest were cows and calves, but they weren't in a hurry to buy bulls. Now that the manor was equipped with people, these bulls were just right. They had to kill most of the bulls here and sell them all. Then they would consider buying new bulls. Based on the fact that he had already signed the contract for half a year, he would be able to buy a new cow in October, just like last year. After signing the contract, Prawalton and Selena Gomez stayed here for 2 more days before leaving. Qi Li and her assistant also stayed here for 3 days before leaving. They had to go back and figure out how to distribute Jiang Hai's meat to the whole country, or to send it to Huaxia. It had to be admitted that these 2 strong women were very capable. Within 3 days after they left, everything was basically settled. Prawalton rented a warehouse in Boston and arranged for 3 planes to transport Jiang Hai's beef to all parts of the country every day. After Qi Li returned to China, she immediately held a board meeting and announced that she would enter the food and beverage industry. However, it was obvious that everyone was skeptical about the price of Jiang Hai's beef. According to this price, Jiang Hai would have to pay $120,000 for a cow. If it was converted to RMB, it would be $780,000. In China, a beef cow was only sold for several thousand yuan, and a dairy cow was only sold for 20 to 30,000 yuan. It was very difficult for them to accept that Jiang Hai's beef cow was sold for 780,000 yuan. Although they had eaten the steaks brought back by Qi Li, they all liked them. However, they were unwilling to spend money to cook such expensive steaks. Luckily, Qi Li didn't count on these people. Her family was rich, so she just came to tell them. Since they didn't agree, she didn't care. The next day, she directly established a subsidiary company of the food and beverage industry. It was 100% owned by the Qi family and had nothing to do with the Qi family. At the same time, they opened 3 stores in the capital and renovated them at the same time. They wanted to build the best chain of Western restaurants. Although they might not be as good as French restaurants, they had the best ingredients. While both sides were moving forward unsteadily, Jiang Hai was also doing his own thing, which was to file his taxes. After a few days of calculations by the accountant, Jiang Hai's taxes were finished. After all the money was deducted, Jiang Hai was finally relieved. Every year when it was time to file taxes, people in the United States felt that there was a sword of Damocles hanging over their heads. In the United States, tax evasion was definitely the most serious crime. Most importantly, the people in the United States almost always relied on you to voluntarily file your taxes. If your tax return was not correct, they would do something to you. Look at how many big shots, rich people, and important politicians in the United States were arrested. 9 out of 10 of the biggest crimes were related to tax issues. For the people in the United States, the Internal Revenue Service was much more terrifying than the FBI and the CIA. Jiang Hai hadn't immigrated to the United States yet, and he didn't have the intention to do so. However, after filing his taxes, he was relieved. After receiving the tax report and the bill of exchange, Jiang Hai's mood improved a lot. The money from selling the beef was counted as this year's income. Although he would have to pay a large sum of money next year, it was always good to make money. Therefore, he prepared to take his family out to sea to have fun. Unfortunately, Daliana and Marian were not willing to go. So in the end, Jiang Hai brought the four of them out to enjoy the sea breeze. It seemed like his mood was lifted a little. After sailing for a long time, Jiang Hai stopped the boat in the middle of the coral reef and the lesser land. He turned off the engine and let the current carry the boat back and forth on the sea. Jiang Hai didn't go fishing or diving. Instead, he took off his underwear and laid down on the boat. He called Little White and Little Yellow to his side. While basking in the sun and drinking cold beer, he rubbed the heads of the two guys with his hands. This kind of life was very comfortable. However, while Jiang Hai was enjoying the sun, Xiao Huang, who had been lying next to him, suddenly stood up. His pair of eyes stared at the sea behind him. Feeling Huang Jingjing's expression, Jiang Hai couldn't help but sit up and look behind him. Following his gaze, he saw a fluffy cylindrical thing slowly floating over from a distance. What is that? Trash. Looking at the thing swaying back and forth with the current, Jiang Hai muttered in a low voice. Taking off his sunglasses, Jiang Hai looked at the floating thing. As it floated closer and closer, Jiang Hai also saw the appearance of this thing. Indeed, this thing is a fluffy cylindrical creature. Its head is white, but its body is black. At this time, this little guy seems to be sleeping. Its eyes are closed, swaying on the sea. He has to admit that it's really cute. Jiang Hai heard about this creature many times, but it's the first time he saw it. It's a sea otter. Looking at the little guy floating closer and closer to the boat, Jiang Hai couldn't help but stand up and slowly move closer. Although he has always heard of sea otters, this is the first time Jiang Hai has seen one. In fact, sea otters are the same as walruses and sea lions. They belong to the marine mammals. Although they have claws that allow them to live on land, they don't. However, they seem to have retired the ability to live on land. Instead, they are very powerful underwater. At this time, in front of Jiang Hai, it should be a male sea otter. Although it's sleeping and its body is curled up, it's still very big. It's almost a meter long. Its small nose and big front teeth surprised Dai Teeth. Seeing Jiang Hai stand up, Dai Teeth also crawled to Jiang Hai's side and looked at this guy. It's the first time I've seen it, and it looks so interesting. I'll catch you as a souvenir. Jiang Hai is not a person who is fond of old things. But it doesn't mean that he doesn't like these fluffy animals. As soon as he saw this sea otter, Jiang Hai had the heart to keep it as a pet. Mountain lions are not easy to play with, and the procedures are very troublesome. But sea otters are not a problem. No, just before Jiang Hai's hand touched the sea otter may have felt something in its sleep and instantly woke up. Its small eyes, which are the size of mung beans, looked at Jiang Hai in amazement. Then it instantly dived to the bottom of the sea. He had to admit that sea otters sometimes had really quick reactions. The moment he saw it open its eyes, Zhang Zian was shocked. Jiang Hai's hand has already reached out, wanting to catch this little guy, but this little guy didn't give Jiang Hai a chance to catch it. Its body was as slippery as an oily cloth, floating on the surface of the water. But once it entered the water, it was the best acceleration device. It didn't give Jiang Hai time to react at all. The sea otter had already disappeared in front of Jiang Hai, leaving only a black shadow in the water. Little guy, I won't let you run away. Seeing the sea otter enter the water, Jiang Hai didn't hold back and plunged down. He is very familiar with the waters in front of his house. Big Idiot has already swept the area. There is no danger, so he is the dragon of the sea. Chapter 277. Splash! As soon as he entered the water, Jiang Hai's eyes swept to his side. At a glance, he saw the sea otter that was rushing forward quickly. At that moment, Jiang Hai also chased in its direction without saying a word. The sea otter is indeed an expert underwater. But unfortunately, this guy's swimming speed isn't that fast. It's just that his reflexes are quick. When this guy enters the water, he's fast. In the blink of an eye, he's already 3 to 5 body lengths away from Jiang Hai. If it took advantage of this gap, it wouldn't be difficult to get rid of Jiang Hai. Although this guy could only swim at a maximum speed of 15 kilometers per hour in the sea, it wouldn't be a problem to surpass Jiang Hai. What's more, this guy was much more agile under the sea than Jiang Hai. However, Jiang Hai wasn't easy to provoke. Since he was determined to catch this little thing, he wouldn't let it go easily. The first thing Jiang Hai did was to kick the boat behind him. Using the recoil force of the boat, Jiang Hai shot forward like a torpedo and instantly chased after the sea otter. At this time, the sea otter looked back at Jiang Hai. It was really scared out of its wits. At this moment, it was also a little flustered. It sped up and swam forward. Jiang Hai didn't catch it in a straight line, but he didn't care. He just hung behind it and swam quickly in that direction. One must know that the sea otter was also a mammal, and it also needed to breathe. When there was no gap between Jiang Hai and it, as long as it went up to breathe, then Jiang Hai could catch it. This was also Jiang Hai's confidence in himself. However, this sea otter was also quite strong. It knew that Jiang Hai was catching it, but it didn't swim upstream. It still desperately swam downstream. The sea otter's deepest diving depth was only about 50 meters. After a period of training, 50 meters was not a problem for normal people, let alone Jiang Hai. Just like this, a man and an otter swam straight from the sea surface to the bottom of the sea. Originally, Jiang Hai didn't care about where the sea otter went. However, when he saw the reef on the seabed, he couldn't help but curse. He didn't pay attention to it. Reefs and corals were different. Corals were multicolored. Even corals with only one color were grayish-white. Especially in the clear sea water, like Jiang Hai's sea, corals could be seen from far away. However, the reefs weren't that easy to see. At this time, there was only a small group of reefs. If the sea otter escaped into the group, then catching it would be very troublesome. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai couldn't help but speed up. His big hand instantly grabbed the sea otter. However, the sea otter was very smart. It also sped up and entered the group of reefs. Looking at the scene, Jiang Hai couldn't help but shake his fist in annoyance. The reef was very dangerous because there were a lot of aquatic animals living here. For example, eels, sea snakes, or some poisonous things. But since he was already here, Jiang Hai couldn't go back empty-handed. So he thought for a while, and slowly swam into the group of reefs. But just as he swam over, he saw a black and white sea snake swimming towards the distance. This sea snake is called the ring sea snake, a very common sea snake. Sea snakes actually don't have many species. There are only 16 genera and 50 species. They evolved from the ancient cobra. Compared to their relatives on land, sea snakes are less of a threat to humans. This was because sea snakes rarely attacked humans, unless you stepped on them, or took the initiative to grab them. Otherwise, this snake is very docile. In the sea, it also has many natural enemies. Almost all large carnivores will eat this thing, so these guys don't have any sense of security. Although Jiang Hai has twice the physical fitness limit of humans, it's still better to be careful under the sea. These sea snakes left. Jiang Hai also breathed a sigh of relief. This is a good thing for him. Slowly touching the reef, Jiang Hai swam in little by little. At this time, he didn't notice that the sea otter actually didn't go deep into the reef group just now. It just hit on the reef near the door. For it, the reef group is actually quite dangerous. After Jiang Hai entered, it quietly left, leaving only Jiang Hai here. Reefs are actually similar to coral reefs. Many of them are wreckage left by marine life, but compared to the colorful coral reefs, reefs are not so beautiful. They are basically brown. Looking underwater, especially at the bottom of the sea, if the light is not too good, it is really a bit scary. At this time, Jiang Hai's place is already about 45 meters under the sea. The sunlight hits the bottom of the sea, so there will always be some reduction. Looking up, he can see his boat, but looking around, it's a bit dark. Fortunately, Jiang Hai is now a skilled and bold person. Plus, he is relatively close to the sea surface, so he still calmly moved forward. Soon he found an enemy, a sea eel. In the sea, this thing was famous for being stupid. It was ugly and had problems with its brain. Whenever a creature passed by, it would attack, regardless of whether it was able to defeat it or not. Since it wasn't poisonous, Jiang Hai wasn't afraid of it at all. But now Jiang Hai's main focus is to find the sea otter. It's not worthwhile to find trouble with it, so Jiang Hai bypassed it. But just after bypassing the reef, in Jiang Hai's eyes, he saw a group of green, blue, red, orange, yellow, a mess of colors in the crevices of the reef in the distance. They were quietly staying there, and outside of them, there were some transparent thread-like objects. Seeing this thing, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be stunned. He had only heard of this kind of creature before, but he really hadn't seen it before. At least, he didn't see it in his own coral group. Parrotfish. Muttering in his heart, Jiang Hai slowly swam over. As he swam to the side of this group of parrotfish, Jiang Hai was more certain that this is indeed a group of parrotfish. There are male and female, big and small, about 30 of them. It's really not a small group. When it comes to parrotfish, many people may think of the parrotfish in the fish tank at home. In fact, that kind of parrotfish is not a parrotfish. To be specific, it should be a cichlid. Its scientific name should be blood parrot. To be specific, it is a cross between a red devil and a purple firemouth fish. These two kinds of fish are also regarded as ornamental fish. They are sold in the fish market. The purple firemouth fish is the so-called arhat. It has a fierce character and bites everything. The blood parrot is a cross between these two kinds of fish, so the blood parrot itself has no way to reproduce. It is similar to a mule. Compared to the parrotfish made by humans, this kind of parrotfish is much better looking. This kind of parrotfish is a real parrotfish, also known as a parrotfish. Its scientific name is Cervicus luotian, and it belongs to the wrasse family. The color of this fish was very bright. Male fish were mainly divided into two colors, green and orange and green and red. Female fish were mainly blue and yellow. However, just like human fingerprints, the patterns on the parrotfish's body were also different. This kind of fish tasted good, although their main food was poisonous. Therefore, it is easy to leave toxins in their bodies, but these toxins are not enough to satisfy gourmets. At its most expensive, this kind of fish can be sold for dozens of dollars per kilogram. It is a very expensive and precious ingredient. However, this kind of fish is not very easy to catch. First, this kind of fish lives in the deep sea and likes to stay in coral reefs or submerged reefs. It is very difficult to catch this kind of fish unless the reefs are blown up. The most important thing is that there are not many people in the world who dare to blow up coral reefs. This makes it impossible for large fishing boats to catch this kind of fish, because no one has the guts to blow up coral reefs. Second, this kind of fish lives in groups, and they are very united. If one of their companions is caught, these fish will swarm and bite the net open to save their companions. A net is cheap, $20,000 to $30,000, and a good one is $60,000 to $70,000, or even $100,000. Not to mention how much you can catch in one net. If the net is broken, you will have to buy a new one. How much would that cost? Therefore, although this kind of fish is expensive, they are well protected. Very few people eat them. Compared to their close relatives, the wavy lip fish, this kind of fish is very lucky. It is as the saying goes, there is strength in numbers. At this time, the thin layer of gauze on the surface of these fish is actually their knitted pajamas. The reason these parrotfish came here is very likely because of the recent warm weather. Otherwise, Big Dumb would have known there are parrotfish here, and it would have helped to drive the fish away. Looking at these creatures, Jiang Hai did not disturb them. However, it is not in Jiang Hai's character to leave just like that. After thinking for a while, Jiang Hai stretched out his hand, and then a trace of spiritual energy was sent into the bodies of these parrotfish. These fish were instantly awakened. By the time they reacted, Jiang Hai had already swam to the surface of the sea. This spiritual energy is enough to ensure that these fish will not freeze to death in winter. He does not know if these fish will stay in his territory. However, Jiang Hai also knows that there is no way to force them to stay. Therefore, after infusing the spiritual energy, Jiang Hai swam to the surface of the sea. When Jiang Hai poked his head out, he could not help but smile when he saw the 4 animals running around anxiously on the boat. These animals of his know how to worry about him. It seems that he has not raised them for so long in vain. Chapter 278. He had to admit that in the United States, planes were not much different from buses. In the United States, there were basically 2 ways for people to travel. One was to drive. This was because all the national highways in the United States were free of charge. Some of the toll highways were built by individuals. For example, New York, Los Angeles, and other highways that led to the rich were charged because they were built with private funds. The state-funded highways in the United States were free of charge, and the price of oil was really cheap. So if it was only in the neighboring states, it would be very interesting to drive. Besides driving, the second most popular way was to take a plane. Planes in the United States were really similar to buses in China. They were very cheap, and sometimes even cheaper than buses. Of course, this was under the condition that there was a discount. Buses were the third most popular way, and trains were the last. In the United States, trains were actually the most unsuitable way to travel. Not only were they very expensive, but they were also very slow. The price-performance ratio was the highest among all the public transport systems, which was the opposite of China. So in general, if people were not taking trains to have fun and enjoy the scenery, very few people would take trains. Although Boston and Miami were both geographically located in the eastern part of the United States, the geographical locations of the two were extremely different. One was in the southernmost part of the United States, while the other was not in the northernmost part of the United States. After all, no matter how far north it was, there was still a lonely Alaska overseas. So, if they flew from Boston to Miami, it would be quite far. It was almost the same as flying from Bing City to Hainan in China. The only difference was that Jiang Hai and the others bought first-class cabins, and the flight was faster. After deciding to go to Miami, Jiang Hai didn't wait too long. He couldn't wait any longer. Originally, he was afraid. The more he waited, the more afraid he became. Maybe he wouldn't dare to go in the future. So after deciding to go, he booked a ticket on the same day. The next day, the flight would depart at noon. On the same day, he made arrangements in the manor. The marine matters were naturally arranged to Eduard Anderson, and the ranch matters were arranged to Robbins Garcia. There was nothing to do at the winery after the planting was completed. Dulles Gerard and O'Connor Murphy were in charge of it. After everything was arranged, he talked to Aphrodite and the others. After a night of preparation, when everyone gathered the next morning, there was a small package beside each of them. With Burke Dollar, Philemon Turner, and Tommy Charles each driving a car, Jiang Hai and others quickly went to the airport in Boston. After waiting in the VIP room, they boarded the plane to Miami. He couldn't help but complain about the flight attendants in the United States. They were all aunties. In Jiang Hai's eyes, the youngest one was probably in her 40s. Even the stewardess in the first-class cabin was the same. Fortunately, Jiang Hai's side was surrounded by beautiful women, which made him feel very comfortable. Along the way, many men's eyes were staring at Jiang Hai and the women around him. Indeed, for these men, nothing was more attractive than beautiful women. In this way, after more than 3 hours of attention, Jiang Hai and the other 11 people landed in Miami by plane. Miami was actually not a very suitable city for living in the United States. The area of Miami itself was not large, and the area of the ocean was very large. Therefore, this city had no super industries. It was mainly based on tourism. Miami was the second largest city in the state of Florida. It was also a world-famous vacation paradise. Its scientific name was God's Reception Room. This was because many rich people and old people would come to this city to live in their old age after they retired. It was precisely because of the financial support of these rich old people that this city was named the richest city in the United States and the 5th richest city in the world in 2009. In order to make these old people happy, it was also named the cleanest city in the United States in 2008. Although this city was not big, it was one of the most densely populated cities in the United States. With Miami as the core of the metropolitan area, the population was more than 5.59 million. It was the largest metropolitan area in the southeast of the United States, and the 4th largest metropolitan area in the United States, ranking higher than Boston. It was second only to New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago, the 3 leading cities in the United States. Because of its location on the border, Miami became the main city of immigrants a long time ago. In addition to white and black people, it was also a multi-ethnic city of immigrants. There were Cubans, African Americans, Nicaraguans, Haitians, Hondurans, and so on. According to the United Nations survey, The proportion of foreign-born residents in Miami was also the highest, ranking first, followed by Toronto. There were many ethnic groups, different nationalities, no industries, and a lot of old and weak rich people. These factors combined made the whole of Miami look like it was not as comfortable as one would think. This was the largest gathering place of South American drug dealers in the United States. It could be said that this was how Miami developed. In the 1980s, between 1970 and 1990, Miami was the largest drug transfer center in the United States. These drugs from Colombia, Bolivia, and Peru brought tens of billions of dollars to Miami. The money was then invested in local buildings. Luxury car dealerships, five-star hotels, high-end apartments, bustling nightclubs, and many other prosperous scenes began to appear in this small city in the southernmost part of the United States. However, the American government was not stupid. This thing was like selling land. It could make a lot of money in a short period of time, but after a long time, it would be over. That was why Miami was one of the cities with the most police in the eastern region. It was also one of the most strict cities. At the same time, American TV series had been promoting this city, such as the famous Miami Vice, and the most classic fourth generation of Grand Theft Auto, Sin City, which was designed based on this city. However, at the beginning of its establishment, there was always a period of pain. For example, there was a period of time when Miami was extremely chaotic. The drug war, the shooting of tourists, Hurricane Andrew, the Elena Gonzalez incident, and the 2003 Free Trade Area of the Americas negotiations, etc. All of these made Miami's name completely stink for a period of time. However, in the recent decade, with the vigorous management of the United States, there were some improvements. Most of the people in the country knew about this city through movies and Channel 5 of the Imperial Court. The Miami Heat had always been a strong team in the American Professional Basketball Association. Originally, when Shaquille O'Neal was traveling to the East, the basketball market was hot for a while. After LeBron James' decision, the basketball market was hot for another 4 years. For Jiang Hai, his knowledge of Miami was limited to the sun, the beach, and the heat. When Jiang Hai came out of the airport with 10 beautiful girls, the men who were near the airport, or who came to take the plane, or who got off the plane, couldn't help but look at the lineup of a king and 10 queens. There were even some men who were whistling wantonly. Jiang Hai didn't like these people very much. Therefore, after frowning slightly, he ordered the 10 girls behind him, "Let's go quickly. I have already rented a car." At this time, the 10 girls behind Jiang Hai were a little confused. To be honest, they had experienced too much today. This was the first time they took a plane, and it was also the first time they came to this southern city. Feeling the different temperature and style from Boston, they were excited, surprised, and a little worried. At this time, the only support in their hearts was Jiang Hai. Therefore, while looking around curiously, after listening to Jiang Hai's words, they firmly followed Jiang Hai. Before Jiang Hai came, he had already arranged everything. After arriving at the airport, the car that they would take, the hotel that they would stay in, and so on, had all been booked. The black gold card was really not worth mentioning for these trivial matters. Soon, they found the GMC MPV that Jiang Hai had booked in the parking lot. Following the navigation, they went to their destination, which was the hotel they were going to stay in. After these days of driving in Boston, Jiang Hai had no problem driving here. The car drove smoothly on the road in Miami. Soon the airport was left behind. Not long after, the flat coastline appeared on the right side of the road. That high-quality beach, the golden sand under the sunlight, seemed to be covered with a layer of golden sand. It was so beautiful. The snow-white waves splashed against the shore along with the sea breeze and the tide, giving off a different feeling. The beach here is so calm. Lying in the passenger seat, Daliana whispered in a low voice. Indeed, the beach here gave people a very quiet feeling, but the beach in Jiang Hai's fishing ground gave people a very heroic feeling. It really was a different kind of feeling in their hearts. Hearing her words, Aphrodite and the others also quietly looked over there. Their eyes were full of curiosity. This was really an exciting journey for them. As the deserted beach gradually moved away, The city of Miami also appeared in front of Jiang Hai. Although it was only the periphery, it still gave a full feeling. Fortunately, Jiang Hai did not need to drive the car into the city, because the hotel he chose was in the suburbs. The most famous place in Miami was their Miami Beach, and the hotel Jiang Hai chose was on the beach, a 5-star luxury hotel. According to the navigation, they were almost there. Chapter 279. Carnival Group Business Hotel. This is it. Poking his head out of the car window and glancing at the hotel in front of him, Jiang Hai said to the girls behind him. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the girls who had been looking outside also retracted their gazes and looked at the hotel in front of them curiously. Speaking of Carnival, most people may not know much about this brand. Even if they know, most of them think that this brand is similar to an amusement park. But in fact, at least at this time, the carnival that Jiang Hai mentioned is different from the carnival in everyone's mind. The full name of this carnival group is Carnival Cruise Group. This group is a local industry in Miami. It is also the world's largest cruise group. Because their main goal is not in the hotel industry, there are almost no hotels in other cities except Miami. Even if there are, most of them are only on their cruise lines. And the boss of this group, Mitch Allison, is the largest shareholder of the Heat. Of course, Jiang Hai booked this hotel not for this reason, but because this hotel has the best reputation on the internet. Maybe because of the city's business card, this hotel has a good reputation on the internet, whether it is local tourists or foreign tourists. Jiang Hai drove the car, and soon arrived in front of the hotel's main entrance. As he parked the car, a doorman came to open the door and take the luggage, but when the doorman saw that except for Jiang Hai, the rest of the people were beautiful girls, these doormen were a little confused. In addition to being a leisure city and a sin city, Miami is also a model city. Every year, a large number of models come here to take photos or attend some rich people's parties. So these doormen have some resistance to beautiful girls. But these beautiful girls brought by Jiang Hai are not ordinary. After all, these girls are originally good-looking, plus the nourishment of Jiang Hai's aura. These girls' figures had undergone tremendous changes. In addition, when they were planting grapes, they also worked hard. Thus, his figure was extremely well proportioned. It could be said that his body was large where it should be large, and small where it should be small. There was not a trace of excess fat on his body, nor was it conspicuous. He was the type of person who would attract the attention of others the moment he stood before them. Except for Delina and Marion, who are still young, the other 8 girls are like ripe fruits. People can't help but want to pick them. Unfortunately, these 8 girls will not let others pick them, except for Jiang Hai. Please come in. However, the doorman still had some experience after all. Although he was stunned for a moment, he still respectfully bowed his head. One person went to drive the car to the underground parking lot, while the other person led Jiang Hai and the others to walk in. Originally, they wanted to help with the luggage. After all, this was a good opportunity to get tips. Unfortunately, Jiang Hai asked them not to bring any luggage when they came out. Therefore, these girls brought very few things with them. In addition to their own set of clothes, their backpacks only had a set of clothes, a set of swimsuits, and a mobile phone charger. How much space can these things take up? So the doorman has been preparing a trolley, but it is a waste of effort. I have booked a room. My surname is Jiang, and I come from Boston. Walking to the front desk, Jiang Hai directly showed his green card, and then said slowly. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the front desk of the hotel also became busy. Hello, Mr. Jiang. You have booked a total of 6 rooms, a presidential suite on the top floor, and 5 business suites next to it. Are you sure you want these rooms? Originally, seeing Jiang Hai's appearance, the front desk didn't pay much attention to him. After all, in this era, a person who travels with a group of girls doesn't look like a rich second generation, but more like an agent of some entertainment company. And these girls are his models. Of course, everyone knows what these models do. But now it seems that they have misunderstood. It seems that no agent can casually book a presidential suite on the top floor, and even book a business suite for his models. After all, The price of the rooms in this hotel is very expensive. Yes, these are the 6 rooms. Book them for me for a week first, then we will talk about it. Glancing at the front desk, Jiang Hai smiled and handed over his Centurion black gold card. As soon as the card was handed over, the front desk's eyes lit up. When she took the card, she unconsciously scratched Jiang Hai's palm, which made Jiang Hai a little excited. After all, since the last time he did it in China during the Chinese New Year, Jiang Hai basically relied on his hands. Although there are many high-quality girls around him, he didn't do it because he didn't want to eat the grass near his burrow. Now that he's out, it seems card. While Jiang Hai was fantasizing, Daliana, who was behind him, couldn't help but pat him gently. She gestured with her mouth that the front desk had already booked the room card. Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile a little awkwardly. He took his bank card and the stack of room cards. Of course, when he took them, he also touched the palm of the beautiful woman at the front desk. The beautiful woman at the front desk seems to be a Latin American beauty. Her skin is somewhat similar to that of Asians, a very healthy wheat color. She is also very delicate. Her long brown hair is draped over her head, looking really wild. Coupled with the uniform, I can't think about it, or I will make a fool of myself again. After taking the room card, Jiang Hai was led to the elevator by the doorman behind him. Soon, they arrived at the top floor of the hotel. Jiang Hai's 6 rooms were next to each other. After all, Miami's reputation as the city of crime was too well known. If something happened, he could take care of the others. When they came to the front of these rooms, Jiang Hai opened all the doors one by one. After confirming that all the rooms didn't need to be changed, Jiang Hai also gave the doorman a tip of $100. Looking at the green Franklin's face, the doorman's mouth was about to open. At first, he thought that he could get $10 or $20. After all, he just helped to press the elevator. There was no luggage for him to carry, but he was really happy that Jiang Hai gave him $100. Thank you. After sincerely thanking him, he directly left. Jiang Hai also looked at these rooms. The so-called business suite was a 2-bedroom apartment with 2 bedrooms, not divided into the master bedroom and the consort bedroom. They were basically the same size. Each room had a separate bathroom with a shower head, a place to wash your face and brush your teeth, and a toilet. There was a TV, a separate air conditioner, a table, chairs, a sofa, and a computer in the room. There was a large living room outside. There was an independent TV in the living room, and a small wine cabinet next to it. There was a lot of wine in it. Of course, if you want to drink the wine, you have to pay for it. There was also a bigger bathroom with a bathtub for bathing. In the middle of the living room was a set of sofas with a small balcony. From the balcony, you could directly see the sea behind, the golden beach and the blue sea. At this time, there were still many people playing there. After all, it was still early. The 5 business suites were all the same. Jiang Hai's presidential suite was even more luxurious. Walking in, there were a total of 3 rooms and 2 guest rooms. The bigger room was as big as this suite. There was a huge round bed, and the TV opposite had its own family background sound. The room had a balcony, and one could see the sea view opposite. In the room, there was wine, water, drinks, and snacks. Most importantly, these things were free. As for the other 2 rooms, one was the same as the business suite, and the other was used as a study. There were 2 living rooms, one for the reception, and the other for leisure. However, they were much bigger than the business suite, especially the main living room. It was not a problem to have a party here. They might have considered that Huaxia people would come here to play. The bathroom in Jiang Hai's presidential suite had a Huaxia smell. It was a square bathtub with 4 dragon head faucets at the 4 corners of the bathtub. The bathtub was not only good-looking, but also had a massage function, which really satisfied Jiang Hai. Tomorrow, we'll go to the clinic that Sandy mentioned. The day after that, I'll take you to West Reef Island. The day after that, we'll go to Bishijing Island. The day after that, we'll go to the Everglades National Park. After that, we'll take a day off. After that, we'll go shopping in Miami. After that, we'll go directly to Orlando. I'll take you to Disneyland Park. Seeing that everyone was very satisfied with these rooms, Jiang Hai clapped his hands to attract everyone's attention. He began to explain the itinerary for these days. As soon as they heard that there were so many places to play these days, the girls' eyes lit up. After all, it was not easy for them to eat and wear, let alone play. But now that they were with Jiang Hai, it was all made up for. Boss, the weather is just right now. We don't need to rest. Let's go play now. After hearing Jiang Hai's plan, Aphrodite's eyes lit up, and she suggested to Jiang Hai. Indeed, if they were to stay in the room and guard the beach outside, they would not be able to sleep even if they wanted to. Instead, it was better to go down and play. Chapter 280. Well, okay. You guys go back to your room to change into Shanghai clothes first, and then we will go to the back to play. Hearing Aphrodite's words, Jiang Hai didn't say much. After all, these people have experienced a lot, but they are actually still young. With the help of Jiang Hai in the past few months, they have gradually walked out of the shadow of the past. Jiang Hai is also more willing to see them like girls, not like when he first saw them. Yeah, hearing that Jiang Hai agreed, these girls couldn't help but cheer, and then quickly went back to their rooms to prepare. As for Jiang Hai, he also changed into a pair of beach pants and prepared to bask in the sun. After all, for him, there is nothing to play with in the water. If there is any treasure under the sea, it may arouse his interest. But after all, this is the beach. There is no treasure, so Jiang Hai is going to play on the shore. Jiang Hai waited for about 10 minutes before someone knocked on his door. The first people to appear in front of him were Delina and Marian. These two girls were already 15 years old this year. Their swimsuits should be considered the most conservative among all the swimsuits he has. But even if it is conservative, it is rare to see a one-piece swimsuit for elementary school students in the United States. The most conservative one is the bikini. It's just that the style is relatively old. The upper body is not only made of two pieces of cloth, but it is similar to a corset. There are a lot of cloth above and below the two pieces of cloth, outlining the upper body lines, but nothing else is missing. The lower body is also a pair of swimming trunks, but there is a small skirt outside, covering all the places that should be covered. These two sets of swimsuits were chosen with the help of Shinty Clive, probably based on the clothes worn by her sister at this age. Jiang, we are ready. Seeing Jiang Hai come out, Delina and Marian couldn't help but smile. Okay, but we have to wait for them. Seeing that the two girls are getting more and more beautiful, Jiang Hai is also comforted. Just as Jiang Hai was talking, the doors of several other rooms were opened, and then the other girls, all wrapped in a layer of towels, came out from inside. Seeing that they are all here, Jiang Hai didn't say much. He waved his hand and led everyone downstairs to the bathing area. While taking the elevator, Jiang Hai's group still attracted a lot of attention, but Jiang Hai's outfit is very normal. After all, they came to Miami to play, especially staying in this hotel. It would be a pity if they don't go swimming. The elevator stopped 3 times on the way down from the top floor. Except for a man in a suit, the rest of the people were all wearing swimsuits. There was even a burly man who was only wearing a pair of swimming trunks. Originally, a pair of swimming trunks was very normal, but this big guy looked to be about 2 meters tall, at least close to 300 pounds. That big pile of fat was tightly wrapped around by the swimming trunks. If one didn't look carefully, it really was very difficult to see that his stomach was blocking the triangular trunks. But even so, he still felt very good about himself. After getting on the elevator, he saw Jiang Hai and the others, and took the initiative to talk to them. But Aphrodite and the others didn't even bother to look at him. But he didn't care. Finally, they came to the first floor. Jiang Hai and the others got out of the elevator and walked towards the passage behind the building. The whole hotel's main entrance is next to the road, and behind it is the hotel's own private beach. People who have been to the beach before know that the beach is not something that can be entered casually. For a seaside tourist city like this, the beaches are divided into 2 types. The first is the public beach that everyone can go to for free, also known as the public bathing area. The quality of the beach is not bad, but the environment will definitely be affected. There are all kinds of people, but it is a good place for the citizens to go to have fun. But don't ask for too much. The second is the private beach, just like in Jianghai's manor, or the back of the hotel. This beach and the shoreline of several meters has been booked by the hotel, or bought out by the hotel. Only the guests of the hotel, or the guests who came to have fun and paid for it, can enjoy it here. The carnival's bathing area is still very good. Although it is charged, the price is still relatively affordable. Some white-collar workers who are not willing to squeeze with others can also afford to come here to have fun. Therefore, there is still a lot of traffic in this bathing area. On this beach, there are about 100 people here. However, compared to the empty beach, hundreds of people are not too many. Basically, they are scattered in different places to have fun. When Jiang Hai and the girls around him appeared, many of the guests who were still playing around stopped their movements and began to stare at Jiang Hai. Oh no, the beauties behind him. Many people would use the excuse of playing games to slowly approach these people. Some men who were originally sunbathing on the beach would deliberately turn their bodies sideways to let the sun shine on their Apollo's belt, hoping to attract the attention of these girls. Unfortunately, these girls do not care about these men. In their eyes, there is only one man. Thus, these girls stepped forward with their fair and tender little feet, crushing the glass hearts on the ground. Seeing that these girls are not easy to hook up with, many people have already given up. However, there are still some who are there, eyeing covetously, waiting for an opportunity to approach them. Jiang Hai actually does not care about these men, because first, he is only protecting these girls, not monitoring them. If these girls have a sweetheart, he will let them go. Second, it depends on whether these people can walk into the hearts of these girls. Therefore, Jiang Hai just glanced around and decided on their location. Let's do it here. There aren't many people here. As soon as Jiang Hai's voice fell, the girls stepped on the soft beach and came to the deck chairs that were already prepared for them. These reclining chairs are free and can be regarded as a benefit of the private beach. When they came to the reclining chairs, these girls also took off the bath towels that have been draped over their bodies. As the bath towels were taken off their bodies, the sound of saliva being swallowed could be heard. Because these girls have absorbed Jiang Hai's spirit energy, and because of the beef that they usually eat, their bodies also have spirit energy. Therefore, their figures are quite good. Their flat abdomens and four-pack abs are faintly visible, but they are not protruding and do not look fierce. Their slender arms and legs, full upper body, round lower body, and three-dimensional collarbones are all extremely eye-catching. Coupled with these girls' originally very beautiful bare faces, they are even more attractive than most men. And the most shocking thing is their swimsuits. In fact, when Jiang Hai saw the swimsuits on their bodies, he was startled. This was because there was something wrong with them. Jiang Hai has seen these girls' swimsuits before. They are very conservative bikinis, and they are less fabric than Daliana's and Marian's swimsuits, but they are very limited. After all, these swimsuits were designed with the help of Mrs. Philomen and the others. These old women have always been on guard against these young and beautiful girls, seducing their husbands. Therefore, although the swimsuits that they chose are not very strange, they are basically similar to what ordinary high school students wear. They are not ugly, but at least they are not very good-looking. However, when these girls took off their towels, Jiang Hai was stunned. The swimsuits on these girls are not the ones that Jiang Hai has seen before. They are all new, and the style is completely different. For example, the one that Aphrodite is wearing is a white swimsuit on the upper body. It is double-layered, with an inner layer and an outer layer of mesh lace. Other than covering the important parts, the big V in front of the chest, and the sides are not covered. There are a total of 2 straps. One is white in front, hanging around the neck, and the back is made of a thin silver metal. Although the bottom is not the legendary t-shirt, it is not too far off. The 2 sides are tied together by 2 ropes. The kind that can be taken off directly as long as the rope is unbuckled is indescribably tempting. Dinah Taylor's swimsuit is black. There is not even a strap on the top, just a black bib with a small flower on the chest. It is the same for the lower body. It is the kind that can be taken off as long as the strap is unbuckled. Apart from them, Hilda, Paige, Sheila, Ohilia, Bridge, Tanis and the others are all wearing swimsuits like this. The only difference is that the material and color are slightly different, but all of them are the kind that can directly appear in some adult men's favorite magazines. Seeing Jiang Hai's dumbfounded expression, Aphrodite and the others are a little embarrassed. How is it? Does it look good? But as the eldest sister, Aphrodite still walked in front of Jiang Hai. She purposely spun around in front of Jiang Hai, and then said to Jiang Hai with a smile, "Okay, wait. Where are your original swimsuits? Who told you to wear this?" Jiang Hai subconsciously wanted to say that it looks good, but when the words reached his mouth he swallowed them back. This plot is not right. Where did the original pure and innocent girls go? This is what your guest, the lady called Prawalton, told us. She said that if we want to have sex with you, then we need to let you know our beauty. She said that this will be effective. Seeing Jiang Hai's 3 parts embarrassment and 7 parts shyness, Aphrodite knew that there is no problem with her strategy. Thus, she took the initiative to sit next to Jiang Hai. Her 2 long legs, regardless of Jiang Hai's feelings, directly crossed in front of Jiang Hai and rubbed up and down. "What nonsense are you talking about? You guys play. I'm going to look at my phone for a while." Feeling Aphrodite's movements, Jiang Hai is dazed. Chapter 281. TSK, you don't mean what you say. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Aphrodite couldn't help but get up and slap Jiang Hai's thigh, almost hitting his vital part. Then, regardless of Jiang Hai's mood, she walked directly to the sea in the distance. Seeing Aphrodite's action, Jiang Hai also sat up from the recliner all of a sudden. This girl really dared to hit him. Before Jiang Hai could react, Dana Taylor also ran over, but she was much more reserved. She just patted Jiang Hai's arm and left with a smile. Under the lead of these 2 girls, the following girls deliberately ran to Jiang Hai and patted him on the shoulder or on the back. Anyway, everyone touched, oh no, patted him before going into the sea. Facing the waves, these girls ran into the sea. But because these girls don't know how to swim, they didn't swim in, but just played by the water. After these girls left, Jiang Hai also calmed down for about 10 minutes, put on his sunglasses again, and lay on his recliner. Daliana and Marian, who were beside him, hesitated for a moment before walking over. "Jiang, is it sexy to dress like that?" Marian bit her lip and asked hesitantly. "If that's the case, then we can wear it too." Compared to Marian, who is still a little shy, Daliana is much more open. She sat directly on Jiang Hai's recliner, raised her small face, and said to Jiang Hai with a proud face, "Don't be arrogant there, just stay there obediently." But hearing her words, Jiang Hai didn't have any expectations. He pressed one hand on each of their heads and rubbed them hard. Then Jiang Hai lay down again. Seeing Jiang Hai's lazy look, the 2 girls couldn't help but threaten Jiang Hai with their hands, and then went to the sea to play with Aphrodite and the others. As for Jiang Hai, he didn't really play with his phone, although it's not easy for him to do anything to Aphrodite and the others. But after all, Aphrodite and the others are indeed beauties. If he would rather play with his phone than look at the beauties, then this person is either a gaming nerd or has a psychological problem. Although Jiang Hai also likes to play games, he hasn't reached the extent of addiction. So he just half lay there, watching the beauties in front of him play with the water. It's really a different feeling. After playing for about an hour, they were a little tired. Daliana and Marian ran back first, lay on the recliner, drinking juice and chatting for a while, and then fell asleep. After sitting on the plane for more than 3 hours, although it's a first-class cabin, it's actually very tiring. Originally, Jiang Hai wanted to let them sleep first, but they were a little impatient, so they naturally played for a while, and were a little tired. Not long after, the sound of steady breathing passed into Jiang Hai's ears. Looking at the 2 girls curled up like kittens, Jiang Hai couldn't help but shake his head. "You really don't know how to take care of yourself." After saying that, Jiang Hai stood up, walked in front of the 2 girls, picked up the towel next to them, and covered them with it. Looking at the 2 girls who looked exactly the same, but very quiet, Jiang Hai also smiled. "Jiang, can I trouble you with something?" Just as Jiang Hai quietly looked at the 2 girls in front of him, Aphrodite's voice sounded softly beside Jiang Hai. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but look over curiously. Prawalton said that sunbathing by the sea is very comfortable, but I need to apply some sunscreen on my body. I don't know if you can help me apply it. Seeing Jiang Hai looking over, Aphrodite couldn't help but take out a bottle shyly. Jiang Hai took a piece. It's indeed sunscreen, and it's newly bought, but it seems that Aphrodite came prepared. However, Jiang Hai can't say these words. Under Aphrodite's begging eyes, Jiang Hai nodded slightly stiffly. Seeing that Jiang Hai agreed, Aphrodite also smiled, then pulled Jiang Hai to her chair and lay down. Looking at Aphrodite's perfect back, Jiang Hai couldn't help but swallow, but since he agreed, he couldn't say anything. He squeezed some sunscreen out of the bottle. Jiang Hai first applied it on his hand, then touched Aphrodite's back with trembling hands. It says to start from the neck, and you must apply it thickly. The instructions also say that you have to apply more than 2 millimeters for it to be effective. Otherwise you will still get sunburned. Feeling Jiang Hai's trembling fingers touch her back, Aphrodite's body also trembled, but soon calmed down, and then Aphrodite whispered, "Oh." Hearing Aphrodite's explanation, Jiang Hai was really a bit passive, because he really didn't know how to do this thing. He had never done it before. But no matter what, there's always a first time, so he'll just treat it as practice for the future. Jiang Hai took a deep breath to calm his slightly trembling heart. Then, he placed his hand on Aphrodite's neck. The moment his fingers came into contact with her delicate skin, Jiang Hai could feel it in the depths of his heart. However, he forcibly stopped himself and slowly moved his hand along her neck. He began to smear it on her neck. After he finished smearing her neck, he went to her back. Just as Jiang Hai's hand was halfway smeared, Aphrodite's hand suddenly moved. In front of Jiang Hai's eyes, she undid the chain on her back. In an instant, her swimsuit was draped in front of her. From Jiang Hai's point of view, he could even see the hemisphere on the side. "Don't leave it here either." Seeing Jiang Hai stop moving, Aphrodite continued. "Oh." Jiang Hai swallowed another mouthful of saliva and continued to move. His forehead was already faintly sweating. Soon, the back was finished, and it was the bottom, but here Jiang Hai really didn't know what to do. Below, you also have to apply more evenly. Feeling that Jiang Hai's hand was no longer moving, Aphrodite took the initiative to pull Jiang Hai's hand over and pressed it on her waist. Then with a gentle tug, she untied the ropes on both sides of her swimming trunks. As her hands moved, something that shouldn't be seen instantly appeared in front of Jiang Hai. Looking at the round shape, the gap in the middle, and the special place in front of the gap, Jiang Hai suddenly felt very thirsty, and he didn't know where to put his hands. However, Aphrodite gritted her teeth. Now that things had come to this, the arrow on the bow had to be released. Therefore, she continued to lie there, her hands grabbing Jiang Hai's large hands and slowly sliding them down. After pausing on the round shape for a moment, he changed the point of attack to the gap. When Jiang Hai's fingers entered the gap, Aphrodite's body had already begun to tremble uncontrollably. This allowed Jiang Hai to recover from his initial shock, and he immediately continued to slide his hands down to her legs. Although she felt a little empty in her heart when she felt Jiang Hai's movements, Aphrodite still had a lot of feelings. She also didn't want to provoke Jiang Hai too much. Well, actually, there was no way to provoke him anymore, or else it would be real. She allowed Jiang Hai to apply on her legs, and before long, Aphrodite's legs were completely covered by Jiang Hai. "It's okay now, I'm going to wash my hands." Seeing that he was finally finished, Jiang Hai immediately wanted to leave, but how could it be so easy? Aphrodite had already sat up and grabbed his hand, just as he was about to leave. There's still the front that hasn't been applied. My hand has to protect this side." Seeing Aphrodite gently bite her lip, Jiang Hai originally wanted to leave, but at this moment his legs couldn't move. Looking at Jiang Hai's appearance, Aphrodite couldn't help but laugh. She lay back on the chair, not caring that the sunscreen she'd just applied had already dissipated on the chair. As mentioned earlier, she had already unbuttoned her top, so when she came over, her upper body was actually naked. Therefore, her two hands, one on the left and one on the right, covered the two most important places, and appeared vaguely in front of Jiang Hai. "Boss, I'll have to trouble you to apply the front for me, Aphrodite said slowly as she looked at Jiang Hai. This time, Jiang Hai really didn't know what to do. His whole body just stood there stiffly, neither moving forward nor retreating. Seeing Jiang Hai's stiff appearance, and most importantly, seeing that Jiang Hai was still wearing loose beach pants, Aphrodite turned her back to the beach in the distance and completely faced Jiang Hai. She loosened her hands, and in an instant, Aphrodite's perfect front appeared in Jiang Hai's line of sight. Feeling Jiang Hai's burning gaze, Aphrodite didn't care. Instead, she directly reached out her right hand and gently placed it on Jiang Hai's mysterious protrusion. This startled Jiang Hai, and he immediately took a step back. Do you need me to help you? Seeing that Jiang Hai was a little panicked, Aphrodite smiled and then whispered to Jiang Hai. She also knew that this place wasn't a place for real swords and spears, so she secretly pointed to her mouth. This kind of action was even more tempting for Jiang Hai. At this time, there were two little people in his heart, one saying, "If you don't do this, are you still a man?" The other side said, "Rabbits don't eat the grass near their burrows. What happened to your persistence in the beginning? Did you feed it to the dogs?" Now Jiang Hai was really caught in a dilemma. If he knew it would be like this, he wouldn't have come no matter what. "What are you doing? Go away." Just when Jiang Hai was a little at a loss, a sharp voice suddenly came from the distance. This voice was very familiar to Jiang Hai. It was the voice of one of the 8 girls, Sheila Rodney. Following the voice, Jiang Hai looked over and saw 5 men standing in front of the 7 girls. He knew that trouble was coming. Chapter 282. Put on your clothes. At this time, there was no time to think about the problem with Aphrodite. After Jiang Hai turned his head and said to Aphrodite, he temporarily blocked in front of Aphrodite. Aphrodite also knew that something must have happened, so she immediately put on her shirt. Swimming trunks were much easier to deal with. She just had to tie them up. Seeing that she had already blocked the exposed parts, Jiang Hai also rushed over in 2 steps. Seeing Jiang Hai come over, the girls who were originally angry at the 5 men unconsciously breathed a sigh of relief. Then they wanted to lean towards Jiang Hai, but the 5 men wouldn't let them go so easily. Instead, they directly blocked in front of these girls. Seeing this, Jiang Hai could already conclude that these people were here to cause trouble. So Jiang Hai immediately sped up without saying anything. The distance between him and these girls was originally only a few dozen meters. How could Jiang Hai's speed be the speed of an ordinary person? A few seconds was enough for him to rush over. Seeing that Jiang Hai had come, one of the 5 people couldn't help but turn his head and shout at Jiang Hai, "This has nothing to do with you, get lost." While this guy was talking, Jiang Hai had already arrived in front of this person and walked towards the encirclement without saying anything. And this guy wasn't an ordinary person. This guy was about 185 meters tall and was Asian. It was hard to tell which country he was from. His body was full of muscles, and he had a crew-cut hairstyle. His body unconsciously emitted a murderous aura. If Jiang Hai wasn't wrong, this person should be a soldier, and a regular soldier at that. At the same time, his hands were stained with human lives. Jiang Hai didn't understand why a soldier would appear here, but his current actions clearly showed that he wanted to be his enemy. This person saw that Jiang Hai was completely ignoring him and was about to rush forward. He no longer held back and reached out his right hand to grab Jiang Hai's clothes. But the moment his hand was about to grab Jiang Hai's clothes, Jiang Hai's right hand directly grabbed his wrist. Jiang Hai's face that hadn't been looking at him all this time also turned his face. "Are you going to attack me?" Staring into the eyes of the person in front of him, Jiang Hai said slowly, "You let go of me." Seeing that his hand was grabbed by Jiang Hai, this person was sweating. Jiang Hai's grip strength was twice that of an ordinary person's grip. Even if this guy had practiced, he instantly felt that his hand was clamped by an iron clamp. He wanted to break free, but there was no way to break free. Seeing this guy couldn't help but be angry. He directly kicked towards Jiang Hai's lower abdomen. This time, if the place was right, it would hit the lower abdomen, and he would instantly lose his fighting strength. If the place was a little off, then the man would be finished. And this guy had clearly practiced. This knee strike could be said to be fast, accurate, and not ruthless. Seeing his movements, Jiang Hai's eyes were also cold. Without saying a word, he moved his body sideways and avoided the knee strike. At the same time, Jiang Hai's waist also exerted force. He directly lifted this person's wrist and slammed him heavily on the sand behind him. Fortunately, it was sand. If it was normal ground, even if it wasn't fatal, he would have a severe concussion and bleeding head. But even if it was a sofa, this person was still stunned by this fall. His arm was directly twisted because of the swing, but this person was also a man. He gritted his teeth and didn't make any screams. "Bastard, you dare to fight back." Seeing that Jiang Hai actually beat one of them into this state, a man among the 7 girls couldn't help but shout loudly. This guy actually shouted in Chinese. After shouting this sentence, the man was about to rush over, but the remaining 3 people around him blocked him and made a path. Seeing these people make way, Dinah Taylor, Hilda Leonard, and the others ran over immediately and hid behind Jiang Hai. At this time, Aphrodite also got dressed, woke up Delina and Marion, and ran over together. F***CK. There are actually 3 such high-quality goods. Boy, let me tell you, you're finished. But this young master will kindly accept these daughters of yours. You guys go. Seeing Aphrodite and the other 2 rushing over, a slightly ferocious smile flashed across the man's face. Then he pushed the 3 people around him and shouted crazily. While this guy was shouting, Jiang Hai also asked about the situation. Just now these girls were playing in the water here, and then this man came over with 4 bodyguards. The girls didn't want to play with others, so they wanted to go ashore, but this man shamelessly stuck to them. When they ignored him and were about to leave, he became a little angry and grabbed Sheila Rodney's arm. Sheila Rodney screamed in fear and slapped him in the face. So the grudge was formed. Listening to the girl's words, Jiang Hai could only say that it was a good slap. Young master, the other party is a martial artist. While Jiang Hai was listening to the girls talk, he was also looking at the 4 people over there to see if they would make any moves. Fortunately, the young man was a retard, but his 3 bodyguards still had some skills. Jiang Hai didn't think much of it. Seeing that the other party didn't dare to move, Jiang Hai also looked at the 4 people over here. The 3 people in front were the same as the person that Jiang Hai just killed. They should be bodyguards. From the Huaxia language, that person just now. These 4 people should all be retired from the army. And looking at their skills, they should be special forces, or some ace troops. If they were in China, Jiang Hai might not dare to provoke a person with 4 such bodyguards. But where is this? This is the United States, and Jiang Hai is a rich man. He is the privileged class here. Provoke him? Courting death. And the leader of these 4 people was not the arrogant guy. He looked to be about 23 or 24 years old, about 1.82 or 1.83 meters tall, with a head of silver white hair, thick eyebrows, big eyes, and a Xiaobai face. In addition, he had a good figure, a V-line, a male dog waist, and an expression that said, "I'm Long Out Yin." He really had the look of a male protagonist in a web novel from 10 years ago. However, it was a pity that 10 years ago, such an expression was known as looking down on the world. But 10 years later, such an expression was known as a tiger facing the sky. It could also be said to be S13 facing the sky. So what if he's a martial artist? Kill him. Hearing his subordinate's words, the people over here didn't care at all. It was obvious that this guy had never been bullied before, which was why he dared to be so arrogant. But unfortunately, he met someone who was even more arrogant today. Jiang Hai was a rich man. What was a rich man? When there was no reason, he would use money to reason. When there was reason, unless he met someone who was richer than him and was willing to spend more money, he would kill you. Seeing this guy's face, Jiang Hai did not say anything and rushed toward the 4 people. When the 3 people saw Jiang Hai rushing over, they knew that this matter could not be settled peacefully. They did not say anything. The 2 people in front raised their fists and rushed toward Jiang Hai, while the other person continued to protect the man. Fighting 1 against 2, Jiang Hai was not at a disadvantage at all. In the past, When Jiang Hai was at the limit of a human's body, he might have been beaten up a little, but winning was not a problem. After learning self-defense from Bale, he had even less of a problem. Now that Jiang Hai's physical fitness had reached level 2, which was twice the limit of a human's body, it was even less of a problem to deal with these two people. But these two people were the elites of the military after all. In China, the armed police and special forces often practiced hard qigong. In fact, it was called qigong. But to put it bluntly, it was the ability to resist attacks. These people all knew how to deflect force, and at the same time, their ability to resist attacks was extremely strong. Jiang Hai's fists were fast and strong, but when they hit their bodies, other than pushing them back, it was a little troublesome to deal with them in one move. But for Jiang Hai, it was just a little troublesome. But for these two people, it was big trouble. Because of their attacks, Jiang Hai could dodge 80 to 90% of them. The remaining 1 or 2 were mostly probing attacks. Rather than hitting people, it was more like scratching an itch for Jiang Hai. And when Jiang Hai hit their bodies, he deflected most of the force with his experience and ability. But the pain that drilled into their bones still made them a little scared. They knew that every time they were hit, they would get a bruise on their bodies. However, they had no choice but to endure it, because their employer was behind them. If their employer was taken care of, it would be their dereliction of duty. Their dereliction of duty was not scary, but the scary thing was this person's influence in the country. If something really happened to him, their families would be finished, so they had to fight for their lives here. Seeing that Jiang Hai was suppressing the two people by himself, and that victory was about to be decided, the bodyguard protecting this person was also a little hesitant. He was considering whether to go up himself, or protect this idiot and leave first. But before he could make up his mind, the idiot behind him had already decided for him. You go up too. Hurry up and finish him. Hearing the idiot's words, the third bodyguard also joined the fray. But even if it was 1 against 3, Jiang Hai was still suppressing them. Winning was only a matter of time. Now Jiang Hai was using them to test his moves, to test out the moves that Bale had taught him before. Let's go too. Seeing that Jiang Hai and the other two people were fighting, Aphrodite in the distance also understood what was going on. Her eyes immediately turned cold as she looked at the guy who no longer had anyone defending him. With a quiet shout, she already led the 9 girls behind her and pounced on the man. Although Aphrodite said whatever she wanted in front of Jiang Hai, she didn't have much of a temper. But don't forget, they used to be on the streets, so they were very clear about unity and what to do at what time. Chapter 283. What are you doing? Do you know you're wrong? Come and beg me, it's too late. Seeing Aphrodite and the other girls coming over, the man snorted disdainfully and said coldly. In his opinion, this was a scene he often saw in the past. In the past, whenever he fancied a woman in China, there would always be some people who would come over to save the damsel in distress. Then, when they were beaten up by his bodyguards or lackeys, that woman would know she was wrong and come over to beg him to let the man go. He often saw such scenes, but unfortunately, he had never been soft-hearted, and today was no exception. Who knows what you're talking about? Hit him. Because this man didn't speak English and was speaking Huaxia. Although Aphrodite and the others also spoke Huaxia with Jiang Hai, unfortunately, they didn't learn it very well. So they didn't know what this man was talking about. They only knew that this guy was very annoying, so they wanted to beat him. Under this Long Outyen's astonished gaze, he saw Aphrodite pick up her slipper in an instant and hit his shockingly handsome face with the sole of her shoe, instantly stunning him. What's going on? Before he could understand what was going on, Sheila Rodney's slipper also hit him. Then the 3rd, the 4th, the 5th, the 6th. These women were really whipping him, and not just once. They were whipping him as hard as they could. In an instant, the guy was in a daze. Before he could react, his face was covered in slippers. When he wanted to fight back, Bridget and Janice, who had been behind him, kicked him hard in the knees, one on the left and one on the right, directly making him kneel on the ground. This time, Aphrodite and the others didn't use their slippers to hit him. They started to kick him with their feet. Although this guy fought back, Other than holding his head and screaming, he didn't even have the heart to fight back. Young master. Seeing the person they were protecting beaten up like this, the three people who were still fighting with Jiang Hai panicked a little, especially the last person who joined in, and couldn't help but call out worriedly. You still have time to care about others? Seeing his appearance, Jiang Hai couldn't help but laugh. This guy really looked down on him. However, taking advantage of the fact that he wasn't paying attention was the best way to deal with him. At this moment, he could already see from afar that the hotel's security had arrived. Most importantly, he was almost done testing his moves. It was time to make his move. At that moment, Jiang Hai didn't say anything and directly went into the defensive circle of the three people. He took the fist of one of them and blocked the leg of the person on the left. With a knee strike, he directly hit the person's stomach. Then he grabbed the person's hair, jumped on the spot, and continuously hit the person's face with his knee. In an instant, the person's nose bled and broken teeth flew everywhere. His head tilted back, and he lay straight on the beach. Seeing the miserable state of their good friend, the two people on the other side went crazy and began to attack wildly. In the past, when they were defending more than attacking, they couldn't do anything to Jiang Hai, let alone now when they were attacking crazily. Jiang Hai turned around and completed a fist-to-fist with the person on his right. Fist-to-fist, the main thing was whose fist was harder. Jiang Hai's physical fitness is twice the limit of human beings. Do you think it's a joke? Bang! With a muffled sound, the man's fist had made a close contact with Jiang Hai's fist. The huge force knocked the man back 4 or 5 steps. His footprints on the beach were getting deeper and deeper. At the same time, his arm was half crippled. Although there were no bone fractures or broken, it was difficult for him to use his strength for a while. When Jiang Hai solved this person, he turned around and kicked. While dodging the whip kick of the other party, he also kicked the person, who came to sneak attack on the chin. In an instant, the person's eyes had rolled back. A heavy blow to the chin, and it was a kick from the bottom to the bottom. It was normal to be kicked unconscious. After the person drew an arc in the air, he plunged into the beach and didn't move anymore. At this moment, the person glanced at his 3 crippled companions and ran toward the 10 girls without another word. In his opinion, if he could capture one of them as a hostage or save his employer, it would be worth it. Unfortunately, he underestimated these girls' judgment of danger. The moment he moved, Aphrodite, who had been watching him the whole time, gave the order. The 10 girls instantly ran in another direction, leaving him with a bruised employer whose consciousness was a little fuzzy from the kick. Looking at his employer's state, he couldn't say anything for a while. He only wanted to pull him and escape, but at this moment, Jiang Hai had already caught up. Wait a minute, you're also from Huaxia, right? Our young master is called Qin Feng, his dad is. Seeing that Jiang Hai had already arrived, he definitely couldn't escape. The man could only stop, wave his hand, and speak loudly to Jiang Hai. Unfortunately, he was thinking too much. How could Jiang Hai listen to him? He went up and interrupted him with a punch. I don't care who his dad is. The punch landed directly on the man's cheek, and a tooth was instantly sent flying by Jiang Hai's punch. The man's body spun in the air and flew past the guy called Qin Feng. He plunged into the sand and also fainted. Please, please don't hit me. I know I was wrong. I can give you money. 1 million, 2 million, 5 million. I'll give you 5 million. Please don't hit me anymore. At this time, Qin Feng also raised his head from the ground and looked at his 4 bodyguards who were usually arrogant and cool. After they were all defeated, he panicked a little. He couldn't help but look at Jiang Hai beside him and beg loudly. I'm not short of money. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai snorted disdainfully. Was he short of money? If this guy gave him 50 billion, then he might let him go. But did he have it? If he did, he wouldn't be beaten here. So after Jiang Hai roared, he directly kicked the pseudo-child of the dimension named Qin Feng. The huge force kicked him directly into the air for a while. Then he fell heavily on the ground and vomited. He also covered his chest with both hands, because Jiang Hai's kick had already broken a few of his ribs. When Jiang Hai's foot landed, the security guards over there also ran over. Sir, we have already called the police. If there is anything, wait until the police come. Looking at Jiang Hai in front of him, the security guard here said with a serious face, but Jiang Hai just shrugged casually, then walked to the recliner next to him. As soon as he lay on the recliner, Jiang Hai took out his mobile phone and called Moses Adams. He knew that this time, things would definitely not be so easy to solve. Although he didn't know who this guy was, a person who went out with 4 bodyguards was obviously not a good person. Although this was the United States, Jiang Hai still had to be fully prepared. Hearing that Jiang Hai had caused trouble in Miami this time, Moses Adams didn't have any dissatisfaction. For him, his responsibility was to help Jiang Hai solve the trouble. If Jiang Hai didn't have any trouble and stayed at home all day, it would be his trouble, because it also meant that he would have no income. After hanging up the phone with Jiang Hai, Moses Adams had booked the last flight to Miami. It was estimated that he would arrive at about 8 o'clock in the evening. It seemed that they could still go back to the hotel to sleep tonight. Looking at Jiang Hai's calm appearance, the security leader here couldn't help but scratch his head with a headache. He recognized that these 2 groups of people were guests who had just checked in today. There was a dispute between the guests, and it was reasonable to say that it had nothing to do with them. But looking at these people on the ground, he knew that this was definitely not a small matter. So he quickly called the emergency center. The emergency center and the police in the United States still came quickly. Of course, it was mainly because this section of the road was not blocked, and it was a wealthy area. Soon a team of police came to the hotel first. When they arrived at the scene of the incident, they couldn't help but secretly click their tongues. Jiang Hai's attack was very fierce. It was almost as if he was playing around and gouging out the eyeballs. However, looking at his indifferent look, the police had no choice but to take him back first. However, Jiang Hai could take the girls back to change their clothes first. After all, it would be shameful to go to the police station dressed like this. After all, this was not a case of anti-pornography and illegal activities, but a civil lawsuit case. As for the 5 people over there, they were sent to the hospital first, and Jiang Hai went to the police station first. However, when they were recording the statements, the police were a little helpless because it seemed that Jiang Hai and the others were the ones in the right. In order to ensure the safety of the guests, the hotel had installed surveillance cameras on the entire beach. They were very clear about the movements in the surveillance cameras. It was clear that the injured person called Qin Feng had grabbed a woman's wrist first, and then he was slapped. When this person called Jiang Hai went to check, he was also attacked by his subordinates first, and then they fought. These people were not as skilled as others, so there was nothing they could do. It was the same as the situation in China. When 2 groups of people fought, it was useless to scold who first, unless there were racial words. However, both sides were Chinese, so it was clearly impossible. So they could only see who made the first move. If it was the other party who made the first move, then there was nothing to say. Although Jiang Hai's side did not beat these people lightly, they were basically all lightly injured. The ones with the most serious injuries were the first and third people. One had a broken shoulder, one had a broken nose, and the others only had a concussion and lost teeth. According to the rules of the people in the United States, these people deserved it. If the gangsters were beaten up, they would not get a single cent. As for Jiang Hai, at most it was excessive self-defense. He would go to the community and do 50 hours of community service. However, the problem was that both sides were Huaxia people, so they had to inform Huaxia's embassy in the United States. Chapter 284. Using his identity as an embassy staff, the counselor temporarily sent away the Miami police guarding the door. He pushed open the door of the ward and walked in. As soon as he entered, the strong smell of disinfectant entered his nose. "Uncle Zhao, you have to avenge me." At this time Qin Feng, who was lying on the bed and sulking, heard the sound of the door opening. He saw who came in at a glance. His eyes lit up, and he shouted loudly, "Revenge? What revenge? Don't forget why your father asked you to come to the United States. This is Miami, not the imperial capital. You can do whatever you want." Looking at Qin Feng in front of him, Counselor Zhao said angrily, Hearing Counselor Zhao's words, Qin Fen couldn't help but be speechless. He often forgot that he was no longer in China, but abroad. No matter how powerful his family was, they couldn't reach the United States. Take it as a lesson this time. It's useless to get beaten up. If you sue the other party, at most, they will be detained for a few days, and then come out to do community service for a few days. After all, you guys started it first. Sai, it's really shameful. You guys started it first, but you haven't beaten anyone. Seeing that Qin Fen was silent, Counselor Zhao walked to his bed and looked down at him condescendingly. A trace of disgust flashed in his eyes. If it weren't for the kindness of this guy's father, and the fact that his family was still in China, he really didn't want to talk to him. The best ending for this kind of second-generation rich kid was to eat peanuts in China. Uncle Zhao, I can't. I've never been wronged like this in my life. No matter what, I can't take this lying down. Qin Fen couldn't take it anymore when he heard that Counselor Zhao wanted him to swallow his pride. After all, he had never been wronged like this. He couldn't take it lying down. You have to swallow it even if you can't. Otherwise, you'll be sent back to China. Now the video at the beach shows very clearly that it was your people who made the first move. You should be thanking the gods that they didn't kill you. If you returned to China, you would be dead by now. Hearing Qin Fen still shouting, Counselor Zhao's face became even uglier. Does this guy think I'm here to play? Why don't we buy that video? Then we can sue him, right? Qin Feng's expression changed when he heard Counselor Zhao's words. Even though he was the one who made the first move, it was impossible for him to admit defeat just like that. Do you know how big of a crime it is to change evidence and bribe witnesses in America? If you want to die, don't drag me down. I've said what I wanted to say. You'd better stay here and recuperate. Once you've recovered, go to Panama and never come back. After glaring fiercely at Qin Fen, Counselor Zhao was no longer in the mood to continue chatting with him. With a wave of his hand, Counselor Zhao left Qin Feng's ward, leaving behind Qin Fen with a sinister expression on his face. Regardless of what the natural-born dragon wanted to do, Jiang Hai and the others rested for the night. The next morning, they drove to the Medical Research Institute mentioned by Shanti Clive. After all, this was the reason why Jiang Hai and the others had come here. However, on the way, Jiang Hai kept feeling that yesterday's incident wouldn't be resolved so easily. Are you still worried about that person from yesterday? Marian, who was sitting in the front passenger seat, asked Jiang Hai quietly when she saw Jiang Hai's expression. Actually, after yesterday's incident, everyone in the car wasn't too calm. That guy suffered such a big loss. According to my understanding of those rich people in Huaxia, they won't just let it go. Hearing Marian's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile as he drove. This is America. It's not a place where they can do whatever they want. Jiang, aren't you overthinking things? Although Jiang Hai and Marian's voices weren't loud, Aphrodite, who was sitting behind Jiang Hai, heard it clearly. She couldn't help but lean forward. A pair of slender arms gently wrapped around Jiang Hai's neck, pulling herself as close to Jiang Hai as possible, and said softly, "Yeah, I'm just afraid that these guys won't play by the rules." Hearing Aphrodite's words, Jiang Hai also rubbed his eyebrows. Although I don't know how things will develop, Jiang, you can ask your wife. Didn't she say that she is still very powerful in Huaxia? Check this guy's background. Didn't you teach us that only by knowing yourself and the enemy can you win 100 battles? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, De Lian, who was in the back, also said at this time. When he heard what she said, Jiang Hai remembered that it wasn't like he didn't have anyone in the country. In fact, Jiang Hai is still not used to asking others for help when something happens. Compared with asking others, he is more inclined to solve it himself. But now, Daliana's words reminded him that asking Qi Li shouldn't be considered as asking for help, right? Jiang Hai immediately picked up the Bluetooth headset in the car, found Qi Li's phone and dialed it. There is a 13-hour time difference between the eastern United States and China. It's now 8 o'clock in the morning for Jiang Hai, and it's already 9 o'clock in the evening for China. Qi Li, who had been busy all day, has returned home. In recent days, she has been very busy, but her life is very fulfilling. First, because she temporarily solved the problem with Jiang Hai. Second, because she found a good way to attack her opponents. Seeing that her Western restaurant is gradually being renovated, she has begun to look for a chef. And she also feels that in family seems to be getting more and more anxious. Today, she returned home after a busy day. Looking at this school district house in the second ring road of the imperial capital, which is envied by countless people, Qili didn't feel anything. The empty house really lacks the feeling of home. Although it's smaller than Jiang Hai's house, it's also less lively than Jiang Hai's house. Should I also raise some small animals? Forget it. I won't come back for a long time when I'm busy. When I come back, it will have become a mummy. Helplessly lying on the sofa, Qili laughed at herself. To be honest, she really likes the life in Jiang Hai's house. There is no pressure. She breathes fresh air every day. When she is free, she can go to the beach to bask in the sun. She can go horseback riding, she can go fishing. If she wants to go shopping, she can drive directly to Boston, where there are the most complete brands in the world. She can buy whatever she wants, and it's also cheap. She eats the best ingredients, top beef, huge lobsters, and nutritious deep-sea fish. Moreover, Jiang Hai is still making wine recently. When the time comes, she can drink a glass of wine produced in her own manner. This kind of life is very beautiful. Unfortunately, she didn't see through Jiang Hai earlier. If she didn't know in Jiangwu, but Jiang Hai, then she wouldn't be able to see through him. If she and Jiang Hai were in the United States now, they would live very well and comfortably. Just as Qili recalled that night, when Jiang Hai held her away from the mountain lion, her heart jumped for no reason, and a trace of red slowly climbed to her face. But at this moment, a mobile phone ringtone interrupted her thoughts. Originally, she thought it was a work problem, but she didn't expect to look down and find that the person who called was the one she was thinking about just now. Is this telepathy? Looking at the name flashing on the screen, Qili gently bit her lips, but she still picked up the phone and put it to her ear. Hello, Jiang Hai? It's so late. Why did you think of calling me? As the saying goes, what you think is reflected in your words. Now Qili's voice is indeed much softer than usual. Jiang Hai on the other side of the phone can't help but be stunned. Nothing, are you sick? After a while, Jiang Hai asked in a low voice on the other side of the phone. Oh no, I'm just a little tired. Recently, I have been busy with the decoration of the Western restaurant. Upon hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qili also realized that her state was not quite right. So she immediately patted her face and returned to her original state. Oh, since you are tired, then I won't disturb you anymore. I just came to ask you something. Do you know a second generation in China named Qin Fen? Hearing Qili's words, Jiang Hai asked her. Qin Fen? Why do you mention him? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qili froze for a moment. In her mind, there appeared a sloppy guy who thought that the heavens were the boss and he was the boss. This is the case. I brought Delina and the others to Miami for treatment. Hearing Qili's curious words, Jiang Hai briefly explained the story. Of course, he wisely avoided the part where he put on sunscreen. He didn't want to talk about it. Miami? He escaped to that place. This Qin Fen is indeed a second generation in Huaxia, a very famous second generation, but recently, his situation is not very good. Hearing that Jiang Hai beat this guy up, Qili felt a little relieved in her heart. This Qin Fen actually had some grudges with Qili and the Qi family. The grudge with the Qi family was because Qin Fen's father was originally a superior figure in the Yin family, so the Qi family and Qin Fen were enemies. The grudge with Qili was naturally because of Qili's beauty. This guy appeared in front of Qili more than once, wanting to show off his arrogance. Fortunately, although he was retarded, he was not retarded to the point of having any bad intentions towards the president of a company with a market value of tens of billions. Especially when Qili didn't go to bars and didn't have any bad habits. But this didn't stop Qili from hating him. Now that she heard that Jiang Hai beat him up, Qili was very happy. Then she told Jiang Hai what she knew. Hearing Qili's introduction, Jiang Hai was stunned for a moment. It seemed that this Qin Fen was indeed not a good person, but at the same time he relaxed. At least this guy couldn't find trouble with him in the government. Chapter 285. This man named Qin Feng's father was Qin Tian, a high-ranking official in the imperial city. He was considered one of the top second-tier leaders in the country and held real power. Qin Feng, on the other hand, was a famous hedonist in the imperial city. Half a month ago, he ran over someone with his car. The other party's family was quite powerful. If he didn't settle the matter privately, he would have to pay with his life. Qin Tian used his connections to escape. This was why he chose Miami instead of Los Angeles. It was easier to escape from Miami. Miami was located in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico, the Sargasso Sea and the Caribbean Sea. He could easily go to any country from here. The lawless Mexico, Cuba, the Bahamas, and even further, the countries in South America could be visited. It could be said that it was a place where he could attack or retreat. Now, he had only been in the United States for 2 days, and he was causing trouble again. This time, he was causing trouble for Jiang Hai. But soon, he wouldn't be able to pull it off because Chile also had a grudge against him. Although Chile couldn't reach that far, it wouldn't be a problem for her to inform Qin Tian's enemies in the country. As long as they caught Qin Tian, they might be able to get some information about Qin Tian. At that time, it would be a heavy blow to the Yin family. Jiang Hai wasn't good at scheming. He was famous for being naive. Since Chile was willing to take over this matter, it was the best outcome for him. Jiang Hai put down his worries and hung up the phone. He continued to drive to the place Shinty Clive told him about. After driving for about half an hour, a large white building appeared in front of him. It should be here, Jiang Hai muttered to himself as he looked at the address Xanthi told him. From afar, he saw a sign hanging on the building's outer wall. On it was a string of English words, Bernice Health Clinic. However, Jiang Hai knew that although it was called a clinic, it didn't usually treat patients. Most of them were doing research here. The main research direction was towards a disease that was claimed to be incurable, albinism. Although albinism still couldn't be cured here, there had been a lot of research results. At least albinos could live like normal people without exposure to the sun. This was a great progress. Of course, although the study of albinism was the most important, it was also very authoritative about other medical problems. Otherwise, SH-20 Clive wouldn't have recommended Jiang Hai to come here. The car quickly arrived at the front of the research institute. As the car steadily stopped in the parking lot of the research institute, Jiang Hai and the 10 girls got off the car and walked towards the research institute. What can I do for you? Seeing Jiang Hai walking over with a group of young and beautiful beauties, the security guard here couldn't help but be a little surprised. This was a place to see a doctor, not a beauty contest. What were these guys doing here? We're here to see a doctor. I've already called Dr. Bernice here. Hearing the security guard's words, Jiang Hai also said politely. Hearing Jiang Hai's explanation, the security guard was still a little uncertain. So he asked Jiang Hai to wait here for a while. After he went back to make a phone call with the internal line, he asked Jiang Hai to wait for a while. About 10 minutes later, a woman came out of the research institute. This woman looked only 24 or 25 years old. She was definitely younger than Jiang Hai. She was obviously Asian. She didn't wear makeup on her face, but she wore a pair of gold-rimmed glasses. Her long hair was meticulously combed behind her head and tied into a ponytail. There was no expression on her face. Except for coldness, there was only coldness. She wore a white coat and a pair of high heels. When she walked, she really had a strong aura. However, when Jiang Hai saw her, he unexpectedly found that this person seemed to be a little familiar. However, this feeling only lasted for a moment. In his eyes, he felt that he looked familiar. It was very likely that it had been too long since he had seen an Asian. This could be a kind of misperception, just like how Huaxia people did not look much when they saw foreigners. And the reason why Asians looked similar to Asians was one of the reasons, so he didn't care. However, when this woman saw Jiang Hai, she was also stunned for a moment, and her face flashed with deep doubts. Hello, my name is Jiang Hai. You must be Dr. Bernice. We just talked on the phone. Seeing the doubts on this woman's face, Jiang Hai didn't say anything. After all, he had something to ask of her. He took the initiative to walk over and shook hands with her. Hello, Mr. Jiang. Sandy has already told me about you. Let's go in now. There are a lot of things to check, so we have to hurry. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Bernice also calmed down. She didn't introduce herself, but continued to speak to Jiang Hai in English. Then she led Jiang Hai into the research institute. However, when she turned her head, the puzzled expression on her face became even more intense. Although the woman's tone was a bit cold, Jiang Hai didn't care. After greeting the girls, he walked into the research institute. After walking in, he discovered that this place was really big. Moreover, almost all of the products here were cutting-edge technology. The ground of this research institute was divided into two parts. There were normal walking paths on both sides, but in the middle, there was a flat rolling ladder, just like an airport rolling ladder. In front of each department, there was a stop point for people to walk. This was convenient for people who couldn't walk very well. In addition, the walls on both sides were not like the reinforced concrete walls of ordinary hospitals. Maybe the main body was like this, but outside the walls, there was an integrated LCD touchscreen, showing different things. For example, the research topic of this research institute, all the doctors, nurses, security guards, and patients living here, and the situation at each time. In addition, there was an overall map. On the ceiling, some pictures were constantly being played, such as fields, grasslands, sunlight, and so on. After all, many of the patients here had never seen sunlight before. As soon as he walked in, this research institute gave Jiang Hai a special surreal feeling, as if he was watching a sci-fi movie. If Jiang Hai felt this way, then there's no need to mention the feeling he gave to Daliana and the others. When these girls walked in, their eyes never left the wall. Along with Bernice, they stepped into the middle elevator and walked forward slowly. Along the way, Bernice might be thinking about something, or she might not be good at communicating with others, so she almost didn't make any sound. As for Jiang Hai and the others, they had no time to communicate with her, because they were still studying the technology here. We're here. After walking in the elevator for about 2 minutes, Bernice, who was in the front, said her first sentence. Then she walked down from a gap in the elevator. Jiang Hai and the others naturally followed her, and walked into the room next to the gap. As soon as he walked in, Jiang Hai's mouth couldn't help but make a wow sound. This was because at this time, in front of him was a completely white space, just like the white in the movies. It was pure white from the ceiling to the floor, to the middle to the walls. Everything was white. There was no other color. In addition, there was only one machine in this room, plus 2 people. These 2 people were obviously doctors here. At this time, they were recording something. Hearing the sound, they couldn't help but turn their heads. After seeing Bernice, they nodded to her. We have a total of 6 tests today. Here is a blood test, a full set of biochemical tests, an ultrasound, chest x-ray, ear, nose, and throat examination, which are the most important ones. Also internal medicine and surgery. Although you were recommended by Sandy, I also have to think about the reputation of our center. These girls must be very healthy. Then I will give you the certificate you need. Looking at Jiang Hai, Bernice said coldly. It was obvious that she wasn't discussing with Jiang Hai, nor was she explaining to Jiang Hai. She was just giving orders. This was her place, and Jiang Hai didn't care about doing these things. It was also good for these girls to have a physical examination, so he just nodded and said to the girls behind him. Hearing that they were going to draw blood, the girls were more or less afraid. But after all, these people were not young, so they didn't need to be scared like children. Moreover, the blood was drawn by machine, so it was very safe and there was no pain, so it didn't matter. Soon, the girls' blood samples had been drawn, and the 2 doctors here began to get busy. After Bernice told them, she took everyone out of the pure white room and went to the other side to do an ultrasound. This room was almost the same as the one in the room. It was also pure white, but the doctors changed from male to female. Although in the eyes of doctors, there was no difference between male and female patients. In the eyes of patients, there was a difference between male and female doctors. In order to avoid unnecessary trouble, Bernice arranged all the doctors to be female doctors this time. After the ultrasound, they would do the chest x-ray. After the chest x-ray, they would do the ear, nose, and throat examination. The most important thing here was to check the throat. After this examination, the internal medicine and surgery were actually not a big deal. Although they didn't need to line up or wait along the way, it was already past 12 o'clock when they finished all the examinations. Chapter 286. It's noon now. Why don't I treat you to a meal? The examination had been in progress. Unknowingly, it was already past 12 o'clock. Seeing that the last examination was over, Jiang Hai still needed to wait here for the results of the examination to come out. So he thought for a while and said something to Bernice in front of him. At the same time, he took out his mobile phone and prepared to order takeout. Of course, Jiang Hai's so-called takeout naturally couldn't be ordinary takeout. He was going to order it at the hotel where he lived. No need, we have a cafeteria here. The food is not bad. If you are interested, you can try it together. Before Jiang Hai finished speaking, Bernice had already rejected Jiang Hai's proposal and said faintly, he doesn't know why, but this Bernice always seems to have a trace of hostility towards Jiang Hai. Oh then okay. After listening to Bernice's words, Jiang Hai couldn't say anything, so he nodded with a smile. Then a group of 11 people, led by Bernice, took the rolling ladder and came to a huge room. Far away, Jiang Hai smelled the aroma of food here. Obviously, it was the time to eat here. Following Bernice, Jiang Hai and others quickly walked into this hall. This hall was the cafeteria of this diagnosis and treatment center. It looked no different from an ordinary cafeteria. There were several windows, one for dishes, one for rice, one for porridge, one for desserts and drinks. It was just that the people eating here, in addition to the doctors and nurses here, there were also patients here. Jiang Hai looked around. In addition to the room being white, the tables and chairs were all white, and the staff were all dressed in white. The patients here were also dressed in white. They were all wearing white hospital gowns, and their skin was whiter than the whitest white people. At the same time, they also had white hair. Each and every one of them looked just like the snow elves in a fairy tale world. They blended perfectly with the scenery around them. Feeling that someone had walked in here, these people's eyes looked at Jiang Hai and others immediately. When they discovered that Jiang Hai and the others were actually ordinary people from the outside world, their eyes revealed a trace of curiosity. Jiang Hai was also sizing up these people. He didn't know if it was because this institution was established relatively late, or it could be because the treatment here was expensive, so the older people no longer wanted to come here for treatment. Therefore, the patients admitted here were not very old. The older ones were in their 20s, and the younger ones looked like they were in their teens. Generally speaking, albinism did not affect one's lifespan, but they could not come into contact with the sun outside. Therefore, generally speaking, people with this disease would definitely look a little different from ordinary people, such as their eyes. However, it was unknown if it was because of Bernice's treatment, but the children's eyes were as bright as normal people's. If there was a difference between them and normal people, it would be that there was no trace of blood on their faces. They were just like vampires in movies. They had white hair, white skin, and aside from their mouths, eyes, and eyebrows, there was no other color on their bodies. They looked a little scary. Let's go. But obviously, Bernice didn't care about this. She waved to the people in front of her, motioning them to continue eating. Then she said to Jiang Hai. Several people picked up the trays and went to the windows and began to eat. Although this environment was a bit strange, Jiang Hai and others still sat there and ate with peace of mind, because the food here was really good. Not to say that it was comparable to a top-notch restaurant, but at least it was not worse than the buffet of a 4-star hotel. It seems that Bernice has put a lot of effort here. Mr. Jiang Hai, with all due respect, do you really have confidence in these children's diseases? Bernice ate quickly and not much. She ate quickly because this was the habit of a doctor, a good doctor. They don't have too much time to waste on eating. She ate less because she was still a woman, a beautiful woman. It was inevitable for her to take care of her body. After eating, she asked Jiang Hai, who was in front of her. Hey, you may not know, Our Chinese medicine is extensive and profound. Diseases like natural deafness and muteness can be cured easily. Jiang Hai doesn't know how to explain. This woman looks like an Asian, but from the beginning, she has been speaking English to Jiang Hai. She might be an Asian, or someone from other Asian countries. So Jiang Hai just casually talked about it. I'm also from Huaxia. Do you think this is credible? But unfortunately, sometimes a slap in the face comes so quickly. As soon as Jiang Hai's voice fell, Bernice spoke in pure Mandarin and said to Jiang Hai, hee, but in fact I did cure them. Hearing the other party's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile a little awkwardly. It's useless to put on any scientific reasoning now. Stubbornness is the only way. I hope your medicine didn't leave any damage to them. Otherwise, I won't do this report. Bernice looked at Jiang Hai. Since Jiang Hai wasn't willing to explain, then she didn't say much. She wasn't a person who liked to probe into other people's hearts. But this wouldn't make her change her principles. Later on, if there was really no problem with the children's bodies, then she would still release the report. But if there was any problem, then she wouldn't release the report. She would even consider calling the police. Hearing Bernice's sharp words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile brightly. It seemed like this woman wasn't easy to deal with. However, although Jiang Hai's face was a little embarrassed, his heart didn't have any fluctuations because he was quite confident in his own aura. Although this confidence has no scientific basis, sometimes science can't explain everything. The meal was already a little dull to begin with, and this time, it was even duller. The other 10 girls, because of some worries in their hearts, didn't eat much. The only one who was not affected may be Jiang Hai. He still ate and drank as usual. He ate 2 servings in a row before he was full. After eating, Bernice took Jiang Hai and others to the living room. But maybe because there were really no foreign patients here. Less than 10 minutes after they arrived in the living room, a male doctor came in with a stack of test results. Bernice, these are the test results of these girls. Looking at Bernice, the male doctor had a trace of tenderness in his eyes. This man looks to be about 30 years old, about 1.8 meters tall with a strong body, but not strong. He wore a pair of gold-rimmed glasses and looked like a gentle beast. Well, in Jiang Hai's eyes, there were only 4 kinds of men. One was uglier than him, and the other 3 were better looking than him. If they weren't beasts, then they were sissies. And if they weren't gangsters, then they were beasts. Of course, if he had a good relationship with these people, then he wouldn't mind becoming friends with them. But ridicule was indispensable. And this person was obviously within his ridicule range. Oh, thank you, Dr. Maud. But obviously, Bernice ignored the man's gaze, took the report in his hand, and flipped through it, which made the man a little embarrassed. Ahem, I don't know if you are free tonight. I happen to have 2 movie tickets for Women's Federation too. If you are interested. Seeing that Bernice ignored him, the doctor named Maud seemed to be used to it. He took out 2 movie tickets from his pocket and asked Bernice in front of him with some anticipation. Sorry, I'm not interested in movies. Unfortunately, Bernice did not let him finish his words and rejected him very straightforwardly. Oh, I also feel that movies don't have much meaning. Why don't we go watch a show? I booked a place in the outer hall of Versailles. I heard that you like to eat the willa there. After we finish eating, we can go watch the killer whale show. Obviously, this doctor named Maud would not give up so easily and continued to speak. However, it was destined that this oriental beauty named Bernice in front of him did not have any feelings for him. She closed the report and said softly, Sorry, I still have work tonight. If you really booked a place, you can try to find someone else. Hearing Bernice reject him so clearly, the doctor named Maud could not help but smile awkwardly. The most important thing was that Jiang Hai and the others were beside him. He could not change his image, so in the end, he just nodded to Jiang Hai and the others and left. After this person left, Bernice also handed the report to Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai took the report and looked at it. The data of the physical examination was very comprehensive. His body, weight, and age were naturally included. Below that were blood lipids, blood pressure, blood sugar, X-rays, chest X-ray photos, comments from internal medicine and surgery, uric acid levels, biochemical results, and so on. Everything was included. Jiang Hai looked at the data in front of him and couldn't help but nod to himself. The bodies of these girls were almost in the healthiest state. This was also what Jiang Hai was most satisfied with, especially the throat. There was almost no damage there. The vocal cords, trachea, esophagus, everything was perfect. It turned out that Jiang Hai's aura was indeed too strong. Here's $2 million. Thank you for your help. I'm donating it to your clinic. Since there was no problem with the report, Jiang Hai also knew that there was no problem with the proof he wanted. So he smiled and took out a check that he had prepared long ago and handed it over. In the United States, bribery was not accepted, but if it was just a donation, then it didn't matter. Take your money back. I'm not short of money. I promised to help you because of Sandy's problem. But don't you think there's something wrong with it? Looking at the check handed over by Jiang Hai, Bernice said faintly, "What's the problem? Aren't they very healthy?" Pointing to the data on the report, Jiang Hai was a little confused. What's going on? It's precisely because they are too healthy that there's a problem. Pointing to the report, Bernice's eyes narrowed. Chapter 287. If I remember correctly, Sandy told me that the original life of these girls was extremely hard. They were forced to engage in some professions that were very damaging to their bodies in order to make a living. I didn't mean anything wrong with what I said. That's why I agreed to check them. Looking at Jiang Hai's puzzled eyes, Bernice said faintly. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also understood what Bernice meant. Now these girls are too healthy. After all, these girls have been engaged in those professions before. Malnutrition is inevitable. At the same time, there must be viruses or internal injuries in their bodies. Their internal organs have been damaged for so many years. It is impossible for them to recover like this in just half a year. If Jiang Hai's Chinese medicine really only cured the throat, then it's okay, but Jiang Hai's so-called Chinese medicine cured all the diseases, which is a bit abnormal. Chinese medicine can cure the throat, can also cure the diseases of the internal organs, can also cure gynecological diseases, and even have the effect of repairing the membrane. I think it's difficult to convince myself with Chinese medicine, so I think I need an explanation. Looking at Jiang Hai in front of her, Bernice said word by word. Such an abnormal thing is really strange to her. If I say that the reason why they are well is because they worship many gods, and the gods naturally bless them, I don't know if you believe it or not. Shrugging his shoulders, there were some secrets that Jiang Hai would never speak of in his lifetime. Now he regretted coming here. I don't believe it. Looking at Jiang Hai's expression, Bernice shook her head, and her tone was very firm. If you don't believe it, then I can't help it. It seems that we are destined to go back disappointed today. Let's go. Seeing Bernice's appearance, Jiang Hai knew that this guy can't be convinced, so he shrugged. Jiang Hai said softly, then left the room with these girls, stepped on the elevator, and walked in the direction of the door. At this time, in this room, the doctor named Bernice had some entanglement and hesitation on her face. To be honest, as a doctor who advocated science, the thing she could not accept the most was the supernatural. However, Jiang Hai's current situation could not be explained by science. It was as if these girls had changed into another person. Her testing organization was the most authoritative and comprehensive testing organization. She was certain that the bodies of these girls did not look like they had just recovered from a serious illness. Instead, they looked like they had received good education since young and had always maintained their health. After all, these people's physical conditions were almost the same as those of medically perfect people. This was what puzzled her the most. However, Jiang Hai didn't tell her. Furthermore, because she had promised Sandy, she wouldn't tell anyone else about this secret. At this moment, she was in a dilemma. All these things that went against common sense made her, a medical scholar, very interested in studying them. But she couldn't. Troublesome. Weakly pulling at her hair, Bernice whispered, "Don't forget my original intention of studying medicine." Sitting on the chair behind her, Bernice whispered in a low voice. At this time, Jiang Hai had already left the institute, but the expression on his face was not very good. It was understandable. After all, his main purpose of coming here was not achieved. He came here to let these girls talk and live normally in the future. However, it seemed that this was not an easy thing. If he had known, he would have gone to other places directly. Jiang, what are we going to do now? Just when Jiang Hai was a little upset, Daliana gently pulled the corner of his clothes and asked Jiang Hai. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai was stunned for a moment. Indeed, he had no plans today. Where do you want to go? Looking at Daliana and the others in front of him, Jiang Hai asked them. We weren't full just now, let's go eat. As soon as Jiang Hai asked for their opinions, Hilda Leonard immediately shouted. This girl usually eats a lot, and now she is indeed a little hungry. Well, let's get in the car first, and then find out what's delicious in Miami. As soon as he heard them talking about food, although Jiang Hai was not hungry, he was obviously more interested in eating. In his opinion, only eating can heal the trauma in his heart. Immediately, everyone returned to the car, and Jiang Hai also took out his mobile phone to check. Miami is located at the junction of South and North America, and it is also the estuary of the Caribbean Sea, the estuary of the Gulf of Mexico, and the Atlantic Ocean, the entrance to the ocean, so the seafood here is also the main cuisine. However, the difference was that there were a lot of flavors here. Most of them were Latin American flavors. Most of the official languages here were actually Portuguese and Spanish, not English. But just like Western cuisine, Latin American cuisine has a clear division. The Western cuisine that the Chinese speak of is actually a general term. French cuisine is Western cuisine, Italian cuisine is Western cuisine, German cuisine, English cuisine, and even Czechoslovak cuisine are all Western cuisine. The Latin American cuisine here is also the same. Cuban cuisine is Bolivian cuisine, Brazilian cuisine is Brazilian cuisine, Argentinian cuisine, Chilean cuisine, and so on. It can be said that all kinds of dishes are Latin American cuisine. But in fact, if you divide them in detail, the taste is different. According to the internet, the restaurant with the highest ranking is called Key West. But instead of a restaurant, it is better to say that it is a vacation island. West Reef Island is the general name of these islands. This place was a small group of islands to the west of Miami. Not only was there delicious food on the islands, but the most important thing was the beautiful scenery. However, it would take more than half an hour to reach it by driving along Route 1 from Miami. Tickets are needed to enter. Although the tickets are not expensive, they cost money to see the sea view. Obviously, it is meaningless for Jiang Hai and the others. After all, they don't need to see this kind of entertainment. The second place is a small stone bar called Jones's, which is not far from where Jiang Hai and the others live. There are all kinds of seafood platters, and so on. The barbecue is very good, but Jiang Hai and the others are not very interested in seafood. Next is a restaurant called Versailles. Jiang Hai remembered that the man made an appointment with the female doctor at this restaurant. So Jiang Hai can't help but pay more attention to it. It is said that this is a Cuban restaurant. The taste is very good, and the price is not very expensive. But because it is full, there may be a line when it is time to eat. Seeing such a review, Jiang Hai is more interested. Cuban food, to be honest, he really hasn't eaten it. Let's go to eat Cuban food. Pointing to the restaurant's information on his mobile phone, Jiang Hai said to the people behind him. When they heard Jiang Hai's words, everyone nodded. In fact, to be honest, they haven't eaten there. Now that they heard Jiang Hai say that they are going to eat Cuban food, they are actually very interested. So everyone drove directly to this place. After arriving here, they found that although it was already past 1 o'clock, there were still a lot of people here. Jiang Hai and the others deliberately shared a table because there were so many people. But after the dishes were served, Jiang Hai and the others were very happy. The food here is mainly divided into two kinds, order and buffet. Jiang Hai and the others naturally came to both. Cuban food looks very ugly, really ugly, but the taste is not bad. Because there is a lot of sugar cane in the secret recipe of Cuba. Basically all the dishes have a trace of sugar cane sweetness. People who like to eat spicy or salty food may not be able to stand the taste, but people who like to eat sweet and sour food will feel good. Jiang Hai's taste is actually based on the taste of women and children. He likes to eat sweet and sour food. so he feels that the food here is very good. After eating, Jiang Hai and the others went back to the hotel to rest. After such a busy day, although there is no result, Jiang Hai and the others are too lazy to wander around here. Although Moses Adams had a lot of fun last night, he got up early this morning to deal with Jiang Hai's case. The reason why Jiang Hai always uses this guy is that this guy can distinguish between work and personal affairs. He would never do anything for personal reasons. This was also one of the things that Jiang Hai valued the most. Once he was given a task, he would definitely complete it. After a good night's sleep in the hotel, Aphrodite and the others tacitly came to Jiang Hai's suite after dinner. Using the excuse that this was the largest room, it was very comfortable to watch TV here. Therefore, Jiang Hai's side was surrounded by a lot of women, and there was also a huge part that directly attacked the line of sight. Jiang Hai suddenly thought of the girl at the front desk downstairs. Can I call for special service tonight? Just as Jiang Hai is thinking about this, there is a sudden knock on his door. When Jiang Hai heard it, he struggled to stand up from these legs and upper body, and went to the door to open it. But the moment he opened the door, he couldn't help but be stunned, because the person in front of the door is not someone else, but Bernice he just saw today. At this time, her face is as cold as it was during the day, just standing there, and looking at Jiang Hai. What's the matter? Seeing her, Jiang Hai can't help but ask in surprise. He really didn't expect her to come. I can give you a certificate, but I don't need money. I need you to do me a favor. Looking at Jiang Hai, she said seriously. Chapter 288. Wow, the scenery here is really different from where I came from. Leaning against the window of the car and looking at the scenery passing by on both sides, Daliana couldn't help but shout excitedly. Although the other girls didn't shout, it was obvious from their expressions that they were in the same mood. Last night, Bernice came to Jiang Hai's hotel in person. Of course, she didn't come here to have fun with Jiang Hai. Instead, she came here to discuss with Jiang Hai. She wouldn't tell Jiang Hai's secret, and Jiang Hai didn't have to tell her either. She could write a certificate for Jiang Hai. She didn't need money, but she needed Jiang Hai to help her cure a person. She would pay for the treatment in full. She didn't care how Jiang Hai cured her, as long as Jiang Hai could cure her. After listening to her words, Jiang Hai was a little hesitant, because he was also afraid that his Reiki would leak out. But he couldn't really go back empty-handed. Moreover, if she really wrote a certificate for him, it meant that he owed her a favor. Under such circumstances, it was reasonable to do her a favor. After finalizing the deal, she went to Jiang Hai's place in a month's time. Then Bernice put down the diagnosis of the 10 girls and turned to leave. Jiang Hai didn't know what to say to this woman, but he always felt that she was a little strange. She was a little hostile to him, but at the same time, there was also a strange sense of familiarity. But with Jiang Hai's temperament, he soon forgot about it. Now that the biggest problem of coming here had been solved, the rest of the time was pure fun. Early the next morning, Jiang Hai drove the car and took everyone to the most famous West Reef Island in Miami. West Reef Island was a famous scenic spot in Miami. It was not located on the west side of Miami, but on the south side of Miami. Driving all the way south, they went straight to the vicinity of West Reef Island along Bishkek Avenue. People in South Florida were no stranger to the term Pizza King. It was used in many places. According to legend, the word Bishijing originated from an Indian language. It meant the place where the moon rose. It was very artistic. Bishijing Avenue was another name for a section of U.S. Highway 1 in Miami. Bishijing Garden was a small town in North Miami. Bishijing Bay was a bay between Bishijing and Miami. Key was the name of all the islands in West Reef Island. The small islands south of Miami were all called Key, one after another. There were a lot of names, but the most famous one was Key Kishijing. You only need to pay $1 to cross the bridge. Of course, you still need to spend money to enter the park. $10 for an ordinary adult, and $5 for those with a student ID. For ordinary people who came to play, there was actually no need to go to Bishkek Island. Playing on other small islands was actually very fun. There was a lot of delicious food and perfect scenery. It was a very good place. However, for foreigners, going to Bishkek Island was much more interesting. The most interesting place on Bishkek Island should be the Miami Aquarium. This aquarium was built in 1955. The main characters were 5-ton killer whales, also known as killer whales and dolphins. This might be the earliest commercial sea beast taming performance venue. In the 60s, there was once a well-known TV series in the United States. All the outdoor scenes were filmed here. That TV series made a dolphin named Fipper famous. Although the dolphin had been gone for so many years, there was still a dolphin named Fipper in the park to increase its appeal. This made the old people who watched the TV series very much like to bring their children and grandchildren here to watch the dolphins' performance. They would tell the interesting stories of their youth. Of course, in addition to the killer whales and dolphins, there are also shark aquariums, manatees, tropical aquariums, and sea lion shows in this 35-acre park. Jianghai's goal this time is this aquarium. The sea views on both sides of the road look good, but the sea view is also the most famous and the easiest to get tired of looking at. What's more, Delina and others who didn't lack the sea view soon, everyone was a little tired of looking at it, but fortunately, they arrived at the place they wanted to go at this time. Driving into Bishkek Island, Jianghai and others drove directly to the front of the ocean park. After buying the tickets, everyone rushed into the park, but as soon as they entered, an American girl stopped in front of Jianghai and others. This American girl looked like she was 21 or 22 years old. She was wearing a t-shirt worn by the park staff, and her face was filled with a smile. "Hello, you are tourists, right? I don't know if you need a guide?" Looking at Jianghai, the girl asked. "Guide? Do we need to explain when we are going to Ocean Park? We are not going to visit a historical site." Looking at the girl, Jianghai asked with some doubts. Is she trying to cheat him of his money? This is not a historical site, but in Kishijing Island, there is more than just strolling around the ocean park. There are actually many fun places on this island, such as some places where you can dive, some places where you can play with paragliding. Hearing Jianghai's words, the girl introduced herself. Indeed, it is impossible for a tourist attraction to have only one place. Like other tourist attractions by the sea, the most famous one on Bishkek Island is this ocean park. However, in addition to the ocean park, there were many other places to play. For example, diving places, surfing places, beaches, and so on. There were also places to play sea bikes, paragliding, and so on. There were all kinds of places here. After listening to the girl's introduction, Jianghai couldn't help but look at the girls around him. They are the reason why Jianghai came here. Do you want to play with these things? Can I? Hearing Jianghai's words, Aphrodite also asked curiously. Although there is also a sea at home, and even Jianghai's sea is more beautiful than here. But Jianghai's seaside is really not used for playing. It is used for fishing and playing in the water. Speaking of which, these marine facilities are not available in Jianghai's home. Well, if you want to play, then try it. Then we will hire you, Mississippi. Seeing that Aphrodite and the others were interested in playing, Jianghai did not let them down, and turned to the girl in front of him and said, "Oh, you may have misunderstood. The salary of the guide itself is included in your ticket. The reason why we are like this here is because many locals can't speak English. They are afraid that you will have some difficulties in communication. So it is necessary for us to exist. We just collect some tips." Hearing Jianghai's words, the girl shook her head. Their salary is naturally paid by the Miami government. Jianghai just pays some tips. Of course, Jianghai doesn't know whether there is a kickback relationship between them and those people. Jianghai only knows at this time that this design is really quite humane. In fact, to be honest, there are more people who speak Portuguese and Spanish here than English, especially many Latin Americans. They may have immigrated here for many years, but they can't speak or listen to English. It is indeed a bit troublesome to communicate. After seeing that Jianghai decided to hire her, the girl also took Jianghai and the others to play. First, they had a good time in the ocean park. She explained the major venues, and so on very clearly. He has to admit that this girl's knowledge, at least in the aspect of the ocean, is very wide. At the same time, Jianghai also has a better understanding of this sea area. When it comes to fishing, whether it is fish that grow or fish that may be raised, the sea in the south is much better than the sea in the north. Just the selection alone is not comparable to Jianghai's Boston. After visiting these venues, they went to see the killer whale and dolphin shows. Dolphin shows are everywhere in the world, but to be honest, there is indeed a reason why Miami is so famous. The dolphin show here is not only to sell feelings, but it is really interesting. Jianghai wants to raise a dolphin, but considering that his big idiot is not bad, Jianghai also withdrew his thoughts. After watching these performances, there was nothing fun to do in Ocean Park. Next was lunch. On Pizza Island, in addition to the ocean park and places to play, there are also many places to eat. Jianghai naturally stuffed himself here, and the tour guide also had a good meal with Jianghai. It is indeed a good thing for her to meet such a generous employer like Jianghai. After lunch, everyone went to the beach. First, they rode the jet ski for a while. In fact, it was also the first time for Jianghai to ride this thing. But to be honest, it should not be difficult. After riding the jet ski, everyone went to play paragliding. After this, it was not early anymore. At this time, Jianghai and others were ready to go back after playing the last game. If you are not going to come to Pizza Island after tomorrow, then I recommend you to go diving. Hearing that Jianghai and others were ready to leave after playing the last game, the tour guide here could not help but recommend it to them. Diving? What's so fun about diving? Hearing the tour guide's words, Jianghai was a little disapproving. He was not afraid of the water pressure, and he could breathe underwater. He dived every day to catch lobsters and abalones. What was so fun about this? Maybe you are diving in other places just to see the scenery under the sea. But here, you can see shipwrecks. Seeing that Jianghai was a little disapproving, the girl smiled. Diving here is so famous, naturally there is a reason. Chapter 289. Sunken Ships. When he heard the girl's words, Jianghai was stunned for a moment. Then a flash of lightning seemed to flash in his mind. He still remembered that a few days ago, when he was in Winthrop, he seemed to have bought some treasure maps of sunken ships. His original idea was to wait until he had time in the future to take a look. Many of them were in the Caribbean Sea and the Gulf of Mexico. How could he forget about it as soon as he arrived here? Now that he heard the girl's words, Jianghai instantly remembered. But thinking about it, it was useless. Jianghai was very timid. If you asked him to dive so deep to get treasures, he wouldn't dare. What if he ran into a giant pirate in the deep sea? A sperm whale upstream, a group of sharks upstream, a killer whale upstream, a migration of jellyfish and a riot of sea snakes when he swam to the surface. What if he ran into a migration of jellyfish and a riot of sea snakes? In fact, if he encountered all these, it meant that he could die. There was no possibility of survival. But since he was already here, it was impossible for Jianghai not to take a look, although he was a little scared. But now the guide said that they could go to the place where they could dive. The treasures that had been dug out were only the places where they could disembark. Jianghai was quite interested in this. Know yourself and know your enemy, and you will be invincible. At the very least, he wanted to know what kind of birds these sunken pirate ships were. In the principle of not leaving empty-handed, Jianghai signed up all the girls. Seeing that Jianghai was so rich, 1 hour of diving, $150 per person. The guide was also very happy. Who would believe that she didn't get a commission? But in any case, with Jianghai's money, the guide specially found a pair of local diving coaches for Jianghai. This was a couple, and they also spoke English. It was easy to talk to them. When they heard that Jianghai had a fish farm and often dived, the two were very surprised. However, it was very cost-effective for them to have someone who didn't take care of them. After Jianghai and the others put on their diving suits, everyone dived into the water first. Diving was also very particular. They couldn't go down quickly, nor could they come up quickly. This was because the human lungs needed time to adapt. When diving underwater, the lungs were at one frequency. No matter how many meters they went down, they were at another frequency. If a person was at the bottom of the sea, for example, about 100 meters, and rushed up without taking a break, the water pressure would probably crush the person's lungs. Referring to the hairtail, there was also a place called bladefish. Of course, it was not the same species as the bladefish, herring, in the Yangtze River. However, this kind of fish was also very common in the market. The reason why there were no live hairtail fish was that this kind of fish originally lived in the middle section of the ocean. The shallowest part was 30 meters underwater, and the deepest part was more than 100 meters underwater. When the fishing net caught it, because the speed was too fast, the fish's lungs would be crushed in an instant. Therefore, the hairtail fish that were caught were all dead. Although people weren't as fragile as hairtail fish, they weren't much better. Aphrodite and the others didn't know how to swim, let alone dive. At most, they could only flop around a bit. Therefore, they could only snorkel, which was very easy and convenient. Therefore, one of the two instructors was specially assigned to lead them. The main thing was to see if there were any aggressive creatures nearby. The other male instructor, on the other hand, agreed to Jiang Hai's request and wanted to take a look at the sunken ship in the diving area. For this, he even tipped them $100 each. For the sake of the tip, they agreed to let Jiang Hai go to the sunken ship, let alone all of them. Naturally, the instructor wouldn't refuse a financial backer like Jiang Hai. After putting on their equipment, the two of them dived into the water. They deliberately pretended to imitate the instructor's movements. After swimming a few laps on the surface, the two of them slowly dived. This section of the seabed wasn't actually very deep. The deepest part was only about 40 meters, but the seawater here was different from Jiang Hai's. This was a tourist area, so naturally, the seawater wasn't too clear. It was fine looking from above, but at the bottom, the visibility was very ordinary, only about 2 meters. The sea 40 meters below was still very dark. Fortunately, they knew that there were no threatening creatures here, so the instructor and Jiang Hai each took a flashlight and went into the water. Following the guidance of the flashlight, Jiang Hai followed the instructor and slowly swam forward. Not long after, they swam to the front of a sunken ship. However, the sunken ship at this time basically didn't look like a ship anymore. After all, it was a medieval pirate ship. It wasn't like modern ships that were made of metal, so even if it was rotten, one could still roughly see the shape of a ship. However, this ship was made of wood, and almost didn't look like a ship anymore. Jiang Hai could only take a rough look. The entire ship was made of wood, and was about 20 meters in size. Don't underestimate this 20 meters. A ship of this size could already be as dazzling as an aircraft carrier now. After all, Zheng He's treasure ship, which was known as the strongest ship back then, was only 61 meters long and 13 meters wide. A ship of 2,000 materials was already the limit of Huaxia's shipbuilding industry back then. Before the steam engine, it was impossible to carry a larger ship with wind and manpower. Most pirate ships were more than 10 meters long. A ship of more than 20 meters could be regarded as the flagship of some small pirates, or the deputy ship of a big pirate. This was also Jiang Hai's main goal. In fact, this was also the case. Before going into the sea, Jiang Hai also learned about the situation of the pirate ship they were going to visit. This pirate ship was originally called the Windmill. It was a famous pirate in the Caribbean Sea, the Black Baronet Samuel Roberts. It was once his ship before he rose to power. Later, when he changed his flagship, this ship was also his secondary ship. It was destroyed by the Portuguese fleet and sunk here. It had a history of more than 300 years. This ship was divided into 3 floors. The first floor was the deck and the captain's cabin. The second floor was the crew's cabin, the turret, the kitchen, and so on. The third floor was the drainage room and the warehouse. Generally, when the pirates robbed gold and silver, other than dividing it on the spot, they would basically put it in the warehouse and wait until they got back. This was also the place Jiang Hai focused on. He didn't make these ships for culture or anything like that. He just wanted to make money. Some people would say that Jiang Hai had a lot of money now. After selling all the cows, he had more than $1 billion, and it was just a matter of time. But who would complain about money when it was hot? Moreover, Jiang Hai vaguely felt that it would be more comfortable for him to level up on land than in the sea. So no matter what, since Jiang Hai was here, he had to learn more. Together with the coach, Jiang Hai shuttled back and forth in the dilapidated cabin. There was almost nothing left on this ship. Not to mention bones, even boxes, whole planks, cannons, and so on had been moved away. After all, this ship was still too shallow. It was only a few dozen meters deep. They didn't even need to use other ships. A crane on land could bring the ship up. The reason why it was still here was to attract tourists like Jiang Hai. After all, for tourists, sunken ships in the Caribbean Sea were still very attractive. After observing the surroundings of the ship for about an hour, Jiang Hai memorized the front and back of the pirate ship. Then, after receiving the signal from the coach's flashlight, Jiang Hai slowly swam towards the surface of the sea. When they reached sea level, Aphrodite and the others stopped playing. In fact, they were just curious about diving. After all, these girls were still girls. Compared to sunken ships and cannons, they were obviously more interested in bags, clothes, and shoes. After changing his clothes, Jiang Hai gave the guide a tip of $100. Then they returned to the parking lot. Since Jiang Hai still had some things on his mind, they drove in the direction of the hotel. Along the way, the girls chattered about what they had seen today, including what sea animals they had seen and what delicious food they had eaten. However, Jiang Hai's thoughts had already drifted to the sea. Although Jiang Hai was afraid of death, he was really afraid of death, but suddenly, he felt that he could give it a try. If it didn't work, he would come back immediately. But if it worked, it would be a breakthrough. When he had time, he would sail his ship over. Then it would be time for him to make a fortune. Humans were like this. They had a certain degree of fluke in everything. Right now Jiang Hai had such a feeling. Looking at the girls around him, Jiang Hai decided in his heart that maybe he could give it a try at night. But before that, he needed to fully arm himself. An underwater gun, a spear gun, a chop-proof vest, a diving suit. These were things that he didn't use in Winthrop before, so he had to fully arm himself. But fortunately, apart from guns and spear guns, these things were sold in outdoor stores on the roadside. As for these two things that weren't sold, Jiang Hai believed that it shouldn't be a problem for Moses Adams. Sure enough, it was similar to what Jiang Hai thought. When they returned to the hotel, Moses Adams had already returned. He told him what he needed. Moses Adams patted his chest and said that these things were small problems. At the same time, he also brought back a piece of news. The other party was also willing to turn a big problem into a small one, and a small one into nothing. They would treat it as if this matter didn't happen. However, after hearing this, Jiang Hai smiled. He believed that the other party didn't dare to make a big deal out of it. Because if he made a big deal out of it, he would be dead if he returned to China. However, this didn't mean that they would give up on dealing with him. Jiang Hai wasn't stupid. Since when were the rich people in China so easy to talk to? Now that he had given in, it was only on the surface. In private, it wasn't accurate. In the next few days, you should go out less at night. I don't think that guy will give in so easily. Chapter 290. As the old saying goes, a dog can't change its spots. Jiang Hai didn't know whether Qin Fen was a dog or not, but he was. He had already been beaten for 3 days. Although he looked miserable, he only had superficial wounds. Most of the wounds were scratched by Aphrodite and the others. Jiang Hai didn't kick his internal organs too hard. 2 of his ribs were broken. Although it hurt when he moved, it didn't hinder him from getting off the ground, as long as he was properly fixed. Compared to China, hiring a female nurse depended on a person's looks. In the United States, flight attendants and nurses were absolutely subversive. If it was an international airline or a private clinic, it would be fine. After all, international airlines were the face of the United States. In private clinics, it was related to the boss's taste. However, most men would still like to see a prettier girl. But public hospitals and domestic flights were out of the question. For domestic flights, the flight attendants in the United States, including the flight attendants from Canada to the United States, were almost 40 years old and had long been immune to drugs. As for the nurses in public hospitals, It was understandable if you suspected that they practiced boxing or had a background in boxing. So the day after the counselor left, Qin Fun's ribs were fixed, and he was discharged from the hospital. But this time, he changed to a different hotel and stayed in Miami. In a little more than a day, his family changed 3 bodyguards for him. These 3 bodyguards were not all from within the country. Only 1 bodyguard was from abroad. The other 2 were black and white. The black man was from Africa, and the white man was from the United States. They were all from the world's #1 security company, Blackwater. After the 2 bodyguards arrived, Qin Fan began to implement his plan. Indeed, he couldn't use the law to cause any trouble for Jiang Hai. But it didn't mean that he wouldn't cause trouble for Jiang Hai, especially in Miami, a place where desperados were everywhere. Tonight, he went to a nightclub and met a person the FBI wanted to capture for a long time. While he was thinking about how to deal with Jiang Hai, a plane carrying some of China's elite landed in Los Angeles. Then, the people on the plane turned and flew directly to Miami. It was obvious that Chile had already revealed this guy's address to those who wanted to know about this news. It was none of Chile's business whether he was brought back to be interrogated, or he was directly killed abroad. However, Jiang Hai needed to pay attention to this. Fortunately, the Americans weren't crazy. They weren't so lawless that they dared to kill people in the United States, or in a crowded place. As for the Carnival Hotel, unless they really didn't want to live, the world's #1 cruise line was a joke. Therefore Jiang Hai, who had already arranged everything, didn't care much about it. The next day, he took everyone to the swamp park. This Everglades Park is called the Florida Everglades Park. It was established in 1974 as a subtropical species conservation area. There were all kinds of trees and many wild animals here. When they walked in, they could see countless frogs, grasshoppers, and fish in the water. They were not afraid of people, and would even come over to eat when they saw people. There were many snails and other mollusks on the leaves and on the grass by the roadside. If they were lucky, they could see sea cows, jaguars, otters, and other creatures. But Jiang Hai and the others weren't so lucky. Moreover, Jiang Hai was interested in these creatures, but it didn't mean that Aphrodite and the others were interested in them. Most of the women were only interested in cute things, such as kittens, puppies, or feline cubs. But for ferocious beasts, their perception was very ordinary. Therefore, Jiang Hai and the others just casually walked around here, and then went back. On this day, Moses, Adams helped Jiang Hai buy all the things he needed, including an underwater engine. This could allow him to move quickly underwater, but there was a problem. Sometimes the speed was too fast, and the water pressure may be unbearable. Moses, Adams also explained this to Jiang Hai, but Jiang Hai didn't care. He didn't care how big the water pressure was. The only thing he cared about was how fast he could run. After everything was ready, that night, Jiang Hai quietly left the hotel and drove to a nearby uninhabited beach that he had already observed. This place also avoided surveillance. Then Jiang Hai put on all the equipment and dived underwater. From this, it could be seen that Jiang Hai really cherished his life. He was really well dressed. Although he can breathe freely underwater, Jiang Hai still brought a small tank of oxygen. He also wore a thick diving suit with velvet on the inside. On the outside of the diving suit, there was also a full-body metal anti-stab suit. This was to prevent encountering sharks and the like. There were 2 spears on his back, the kind that could shoot triangular iron arrows. Generally, the island countries used this kind of spear to hunt whales. Jiang Hai also carried 2 spears on his back, plus an underwater mobile phone that could shoot 8 bullets underwater. It was said to be made in Russia. Jiang Hai didn't know whether it was made in Russia or not, but it was quite heavy in his hands, according to Moses Adams. These 3 things, in fact, were not troublesome to get locally. After all, this was a very chaotic city. But there was one thing. These 3 things could not be brought back, so Jiang Hai could only enjoy himself here. He had to throw them away before leaving. Jiang Hai didn't care. In fact, he just took these things for self-defense. In addition, he also took a dagger, the external underwater engine, a bag like the stab-proof suit, a very bright headlamp, and a GPS positioning device that could be used underwater. Before this, he had asked AI Dehua to show him the location of the drawings through the internet and marked the closest point to here. Such equipment, not to say that he was armed to the teeth, but it was almost there. Underwater, Jiang Hai started the engine and rushed to the place he booked in the distance. Even if there was an engine underwater, the speed was definitely not comparable to that of a ship. But fortunately, this time Jiang Hai's target location was not very far, probably only about 100 nautical miles from Miami. The ship just sank in a trench, according to the information written on it. The owner of the ship here was the ship of Henry Morgan, an early pirate known as the Demon of the Sea. Henry Morgan himself died in 1688. He was one of the earliest pirates. He was also the most notorious guy, but he had a great reputation among pirates, because this guy's life could also be said to be a legendary life. In the earliest days, he was actually a marine. In the era of Spanish domination of the Atlantic, Britain was actually a bird living under Spain. However, the British were not willing to go on like this. So at that time, there were many appointed pirates. They were pirates, but in fact they were specially arranged by various countries, that is, the so-called plundering license holders. According to the current words, they are shichibukai, but this shichibukai is not recognized by other countries. Henry Morgan was the most powerful shichibukai at that time. His crew were all thieves, liars, runaway slaves, murderers without a skill. Don't even think about getting on his ship. It was precisely because he gathered these people that his power expanded very quickly. When Columbus first arrived near Jamaica in the Caribbean Sea, he once described it as the most beautiful island in the eye. The mountains are continuous, and the land seems to touch the sky. But in fact, when the British first landed in this place, it was not so beautiful. The place where they landed was a small piece of barren land. In order to guard against the Spanish, the British built Port Royal here. In just a few years, it became the capital of Sind, the city of red names. It was the most notorious secular paradise with the worst discipline. Known as the most evil place on earth, under the rule of the British, it was the capital of Jamaica, and also the sky of pirates. Among the pirates, Henry Morgan was definitely the most powerful one. He attacked the Spanish merchant ships and residences, and then returned to Port Royal to squander. According to the records at that time, Port Royal's rum was flowing all over the place, and people were drunk to death everywhere. The only task of the female professional workers was to help the sailors say goodbye to the money in their pockets. Most of this money was robbed by Henry Morgan, and it was precisely because of this that his reputation was so high that it made people's hair stand on end. He led 650 sailors to attack 2 cities along the coast of Venezuela, and looted a large amount of treasures in the Battle of the Gods. He found that the Spanish had blocked this area, with cannons on the coast and 3 huge warships lying in the open sea channel. Just when the people on their side thought that they were dead, Henry Morgan blew up 2 warships with a boat loaded with explosives, and then played a trick to make the Spanish think that they were going to attack the inland, but they slipped away quietly under the cover of the night. In this battle, he was regarded as a god, and was named the Pirate King. Later, he gathered 36 ships, and more than 2,000 pirates and attacked Panama. After a big battle, the pirates won a Pyrrhic victory, but at that time, the British had signed an armistice with the Spanish. He was then summoned back to the country, and put in prison for breaking the unity. But he was a smart man, so in the end, King Charles II pardoned him, and appointed him as the Lieutenant Governor of Jamaica. He worked for 15 years, until his death in 1688. Chapter 291. Jiang Hai didn't care about what happened to Henry Morgan. He was too lazy to care. Anyway, Henry Morgan had been dead for almost 400 years. However, Jiang Hai was still very interested in his treasure. His target this time was the sunken ship called Sin City. Of course, this name was written on the sea map. Jiang Hai wasn't sure if it was real or not. In fact, many people knew about this ship. Even the British government knew about it, because it was very famous when it sank. At that time, the United States was not as powerful as it was now. At the beginning, This place was also a colony of European countries. After 1773, the United Kingdom alone gained the upper hand. Before that, this place was a colony of Britain, France, Holland, Germany, and other countries. When the United Kingdom and Spain were in deep trouble, Henry Morgan naturally focused his attention not only on South America, but also on North America, especially Florida. After all, this place was the estuary of the Caribbean Sea. Usually, when gathering grass to beat rabbits, they would always attack once or twice. This ship was blocked by the Spanish fleet here, after robbing the Spanish colony in North America. After a big battle, although Henry Morgan escaped, he also left behind a few battleships. Some of the more submerged ships had long been divided by the United Kingdom and Spain. Later, some of the more submerged ships were gradually salvaged after entering the later era of science and technology. However, only the ship with the most jewelry had not been salvaged, because this ship was really unlucky. In this sea area, there was almost an oceanic trench. But coincidentally, there was only one trench. The deepest one was more than 3,700 meters. And this ship happened to be stuck at a depth of about 1,760 meters. At this depth, it was impossible for people to go down. If they sent a submarine or something like that, they were afraid that the ship would fall more than 3,000 meters. Then it would be even more impossible to salvage it. So, although they knew that the ship was here, there was nothing they could do. If they lost it, they were reluctant. If they could salvage it, they couldn't do it. They couldn't even get the things inside. So in the end, whether it was the United States or the United Kingdom, they decided to leave it here. Anyway, it wouldn't be lost. Later on, when the fisherman was selling these treasure maps, some people also found this place. However, after taking a look, they were prepared to go back and beat that guy up. It was impossible to fish up such a boat. However, it didn't mean that Jiang Hai couldn't do it. At least Jiang Hai was working hard for this. The speed of the engine wasn't slow, and Jiang Hai was also the fastest, about 20 nautical miles per hour. Jiang Hai ran for nearly 6 hours in the water, and when he reached the trench, it was already midnight. Looking at his Rolex watch, Jiang Hai turned on the headlight, but as soon as he turned it on, he was shocked. He turned on his headlight and saw a huge fish swimming quickly in front of him. Subconsciously, he wanted to grab the spear gun. But when he looked closely, he realized that the fish was not a shark, but a bluefin tuna, which was more valuable than any other shark. Looking at the blue lines on its back and its streamlined body, Zhang Zian was shocked. Jiang Hai breathed a sigh of relief. As long as it wasn't a shark, this fish couldn't attack him. After the fish swam away quickly, Jiang Hai also looked around. The Atlantic bluefin tuna was actually a fish that lived in groups. With a sweep of the headlight, Jiang Hai also found that in the vicinity, in addition to the Atlantic bluefin tuna he saw just now, there were many other tunas, but the species were a bit mixed. Most of them were Atlantic bluefin, but some of them were yellowfin. After raising fish for so many years, Jiang Hai's ability to judge fish was still there. According to Jiang Hai's preliminary estimate, if it wasn't for the hype of the kingfish, this batch of tuna was worth about $2 million. This made Jiang Hai smack his lips. This was more profitable than raising cattle. Salmon, American redfish, compared with this fish, it was really not a grade worse. Unfortunately, there was no way to cultivate these fish, because this fish had to swim around all year round. The area of his own fishery was still too small, and there was no way to sell this kind of fish seedlings. There were no live ones, let alone artificial breeding. This was just for show. If Jiang Hai came here by boat, he could get a few on board, provided that they were not discovered by others. One must know that there was a time limit to the fishing of tuna. Every year from August to October, it was the time to fish for tuna. After this time, it was not allowed to fish. So Jiang Hai could only sigh regretfully and plunge into the deep sea. As the numbers on Jiang Hai's GPS kept jumping, Jiang Hai was getting farther and farther away from sea level. Along the way, Jiang Hai saw a lot of creatures. Most of them were fish, of course. There were some other things occasionally. For example, jellyfish and the like. And even Jiang Hai saw a few sharks in the distance. But unfortunately, They were all small sharks, either cat sharks or mackerel sharks. These sharks were not big in size. When they saw the light source, they would come over to take a look, but they would leave immediately after taking a look. Obviously, the sharks here had seen humans and suffered losses in the hands of humans. They were unwilling to meet Jiang Hai face to face. As the water got deeper and deeper, Jiang Hai also felt that the water temperature was getting colder and colder. Even if he was wearing fluffy clothes inside, Jiang Hai felt a little cold and couldn't help but shrink his neck. The temperature of the sea changed all year round. The temperature of the sea level was related to the local temperature, but 350 meters below the sea level, basically the whole world, except for the North Pole and the South Pole, the temperature was about the same. This layer was also called the thermosphere, and below the thermosphere, the deeper 1 kilometer, the colder it would be. Take the Atlantic Ocean for example. The average temperature of the Atlantic Ocean was 16 degrees. 9 degrees. 1 kilometer below the surface of the water temperature was about 4 to 5 degrees. 1 kilometer below, it was 2 to 3 degrees. About 3 kilometers below, it was more than 1 degree. Although Jiang Hai is now extremely resistant, it is not to the extent that he can't avoid cold and heat. But as long as the temperature is not negative 20 or 30 degrees, Jiang Hai still has no problem. As the bottom of the sea got deeper and deeper, after 1 kilometer, the fish around Jiang Hai completely disappeared. Originally, before 1 kilometer, he occasionally saw a very ugly fish, lanternfish, whose scientific name is deep-sea anglerfish. It looks similar to an anglerfish, but there is a small light on its head, which attracts other small fish to look at it curiously. Then it eats the fish. This kind of fish basically lives between 700 and 900 meters. After 1 kilometer, this kind of fish disappeared. It seemed that in an instant, there was only Jiang Hai in the whole world. Except for the place where the headlight shone, the other places were dark. To be honest, such a scene is really scary. After all, there is nothing around him. In Jiang Hai's mind, he unconsciously imagined that he was swimming in front of some sea monsters, preparing to prey on him. Fortunately, he knows that this is just his imagination. While giving himself courage, he maintained his focus and continued to swim downstream. At about 2 o'clock in the morning, Jiang Hai's headlight, which can illuminate 200 meters, finally found his target, Sin City. This is a very old medieval galleon. The whole length of the ship is about 30 meters, and the width is about half of the length, about 15 meters. Although the sinking time is longer than the time Jiang Hai saw the sunken ship last time, perhaps because it has been in the deep sea, there is no oxygen and no sunlight, so the natural corrosion is much lower. How can Jiang Hai live without oxygen? Well, Jiang Hai also doesn't know how he lives here. Anyway, he doesn't feel suffocated. At this time, the ship was in an I shape. The bow and stern of the ship happened to be stuck on both sides of the sea. It was just hanging there. The sails and other things on the ship had long rotted away. Some of the ship's planks and other things were also broken. Some passing kelp has taken root and sprouted in the empty cabin. It floats around with the current under the water, as if it is saying, "Come on, come on." But who knows what the result will be after going there. On the bow of the ship, the Virgin Mary, which was originally made of metal, can no longer be seen at this time. Only a lot of shellfish can be seen parasitizing there. There are also some plants that Jiang Hai can't name. Looking at the appearance of the ship, Jiang Hai feels that the cold wind in his head seems to be getting stronger and stronger. The whole ship gives people the feeling of a ghost ship. Well, this is a ghost ship to begin with. Jiang Hai deliberately looked at the ship when he was descending. The ship is just hanging on the edge of the cliff. Although he is not sure if the ship can withstand the impact of his fall, Jiang Hai is not prepared to try. If it can't withstand the impact and falls, won't he have to live more than 2,000 meters downstream? That would be too tiring. So he is prepared to lie down on the cliffs on both sides first, then slowly walk to the ship. But the moment Jiang Hai shines the headlight on the cliffs on both sides, his scalp feels like it is exploding. The hair on his whole body tightens in an instant, and his hair stands on end. His whole back gives a dense feeling of disgust. He almost can't hold the engine in his hand. Fortunately, he is a brave person. He forcibly grabbed the engine and turned it off, preventing it from falling. Jiang Hai swallowed another mouthful of saliva. He resisted the disgust and looked at the cliffs on both sides. Under the illumination of his headlight, the cliffs on both sides are densely packed with countless insects. Looking at these insects, Jiang Hai subconsciously stopped in the middle. He doesn't know what to do. Chapter 292. Phew, calm down, calm down. Jiang Hai placed the engine behind him and took 2 deep breaths. Well, he didn't know what he was inhaling, but he was just comforting himself to calm down. Then he looked at the worms again. The smallest of these worms was as big as an adult's head. They had a fleshy brown body and were just lying there, moving their tentacles from time to time. They had a hard shell on their back and looked like a cockroach, but they didn't have wings. The one that looked the most similar to a cockroach was the tide worm. Its Chinese name was rat woman. Usually, people who lived in a one-story house, or if the house was damp, would be prone to this worm. It wasn't big, only 3 to 5 centimeters long. It didn't bite and wasn't poisonous, so it wasn't harmful to humans. It mainly ate leaves and vegetables, and was a threat to nature. But in fact, tide worms originally lived in the sea. They were the only crustaceans that adapted to living on land. They were considered close relatives to crabs, shrimps, lobsters, and so on. They didn't want to eat shrimps at all. The creature in front of Jiang Hai was called the giant deep-sea louse. In fact, it was the tide worm of the sea. Although this creature wasn't as herbivorous as the tide worm, it wasn't a threat to humans. Although this creature was carnivorous, it wasn't a ferocious creature. They only cleaned the carcasses of animals at the bottom of the sea. Their combat power was really weak. Jiang Hai entered the deep sea and was already heavily armed, not to mention these deep-sea creatures. Therefore, he more or less understood the situation. After seeing the creature clearly, Jiang Hai gradually calmed down. He glanced at the ship below and swam towards the cliff. Perhaps they felt the change in the water flow. When Jiang Hai swam over, the deep-sea louse quickly crawled away. Obviously, compared to Jiang Hai, who was afraid of them, they were more afraid of Jiang Hai. This allowed Jiang Hai to gently lie down on the cliff. After slowly climbing down, Jiang Hai arrived at the bow of the ship. Jiang Hai's feet left the cliff, and with a light step, he was already standing on the Maria statue on the bow of the ship. Bang! When Jiang Hai's foot landed, although he only added a little weight, the ship still shook. This gave Jiang Hai a fright. Fortunately, the ship only shook a little before it stopped shaking. This made Jiang Hai feel relieved. But just as he took a step forward, a shadow flashed in front of him. This gave him another scare. But when the headlight shone over, he couldn't help but feel a little stuffy. This was a devouring eel. There were many photos of this thing on the internet. It had a big head and a body as thin as a rope. The longest they could grow was 1.8 meters. They lived in the deep sea, but they still posed no threat to him. Sigh, how dare I? Jiang Hai was speechless as he watched the devouring eel swim away. Ever since he entered the bottom of the sea, he had been startled. It was too tiring. When did he become so timid? In fact, it wasn't Jiang Hai's fault. People would always have some fear of the unknown, just like him now. There is nothing to be afraid of. There is nothing to be afraid of. After giving himself a boost of courage, Jiang Hai took out the spear gun behind him. Next time, if anyone scares him, he will shoot them without hesitation. Since Jiang Hai wanted to come to the deep sea, he naturally checked the information. In fact, in the deep sea, except for some poisonous creatures, at least among the animals found by humans, there were almost no animals that were a threat to humans. In the deep sea, there were 4 kinds of creatures with the most aggressive. The giant squid was divided into 2 kinds, the king squid and the giant spear squid. The king squid was up to 20 meters long, and the giant spear squid was bigger than the king squid, which was a threat to humans. Second, the sperm whale, after all, was a carnivorous whale. It was definitely a threat. Third, the six-jaw shark, which was an extremely ancient shark. It had not evolved, since it evolved 200 million years ago. It was one of the overlords in the deep sea. Fourthly, The emperor ribbonfish, which was the thing that was always regarded as the Dragon King, could grow up to 15 meters long. However, there was a problem. This kind of fish had no teeth and moved very slowly. It was not much faster than a human walking in the water. This hunting game was like an eel, hiding in a place and then waiting for a fish to come over. Then, it would suck the fish in and be done with it. Except for these four creatures, there were no deep-sea creatures that were a threat to Jiang Hai. Sometimes Jiang Hai thought too much. After taking a few deep breaths, Jiang Hai walked forward. Of course, knowing was knowing, but humans still knew little about the deep sea after all. If there were any messy creatures, it would be troublesome. If a plesiosaur or basilosaurus came out, wouldn't Jiang Hai be finished here? So it would never be wrong to be careful. Walking forward little by little, Jiang Hai found that there were still many creatures in the vicinity. For example, there was a fish swimming by him at this time. This fish was about 15 or 16 centimeters long and looked very ugly. The towel was ugly, but in fact compared to it, the towel was actually a very beautiful fish. It could be raised as an ornamental fish. This kind of fish was not big, but it was earth-shattering. Perhaps in the deep sea, no one could see each other when they reached adulthood. This kind of fish had almost the same face as the tawau, but its big teeth were crooked and protruding out like this. So it was even more ugly. This fish was called fong, and it was a very common fish in the deep sea. From 500 meters to 5,000 meters below sea level, it was their paradise. In fact, according to human standards, 200 meters below sea level was the deep sea. In addition to this deep sea overlord, Jiang Hai also saw a very beautiful creature. Jiang Hai had only seen this creature dead. This creature was called string eel. Unlike the ugly devouring eel, this string eel was very beautiful. Its entire body was like a string. It had a long mouth and big eyes. Most importantly, this kind of string eel could emit light. Moreover, its skin was transparent, and one could see its internal organs. Therefore, when it flashed, it was quite beautiful. But unfortunately, these creatures could not be taken to the surface. The water pressure was different, so they would die if they went up. In addition, there were a lot of shellfish and insects here. Jiang Hai had always been disinterested in insects. Therefore, he only took a glance and quickly walked towards the depths of the ship, following what he had learned. Such a ship, the first floor in plate armor, had almost no treasures. The first floor was the captain's room. If it was not the captain's main ship, then it was the first mate who was the captain. The second floor was where the sailors lived. There was also a cannon room, a warehouse for vegetables and wine, and a kitchen. Some pirates would put their treasures on the second floor because the space in the warehouse was not enough. But this ship was so big that it was almost impossible. The only treasures that could be found on the second floor were those that the pirates directly divided after robbing and kept. But the probability of this was not very high, so Jiang Hai's goal was the third floor. Of course, when he passed by the second floor, it was also good to take a look. Jiang Hai walked slowly forward on the plate armor. After reaching the captain's room, he also took a look inside. The door of the captain's room had long been lost. As a result, there was nothing inside. Other than scaring away 2 vampire squid, there was nothing else. As for the vampire squid, it was just a name. This kind of small squid, the largest was only 15 centimeters. Unless it was caught and looked at closely, it was a little scary. Other than that, there was no other effect. Jiang Hai was afraid, but he would not be afraid of these things. After confirming that there was nothing in the captain's room, Jiang Hai followed the passage of the first floor of the plate armor and slowly climbed to the second floor. After entering the second floor, under the sweep of the headlamp, there was nothing else except for some fangs and line eels. Jiang Hai walked down carefully. Compared to the first floor, the door on the second floor was much better maintained. Perhaps it was because it opened inwards. It was still well preserved, but unfortunately, Jiang Hai was not a person who liked to preserve cultural relics. Anyway, he could not get on this ship, so he did not hold back. Holding the spear in both hands, Jiang Hai went up and kicked a wooden door directly out. The situation in the cabin was reflected in Jiang Hai's sight. This should be a sailor's room. There were 2 bunk beds in it, and there were some sawdust and some clothes that were blown up by Jiang Hai's kick. Other than that, there was nothing else. Jiang Hai couldn't help but curl his lips after glancing at it. Sure enough, it was as he thought. There were probably not many treasures in these sailors' rooms. But just as he was about to leave, he suddenly saw a reflection in the corner of the upper bunk of a bed. This made Jiang Hai a little surprised, so he slowly swam in and came to the second floor. After 400 years, the wood of the bed would certainly not be able to withstand Jiang Hai's footsteps. Now that it had a shape, it was already quite difficult. Therefore, Jiang Hai could only float and look at the direction of his gaze. He saw that there was something hanging on the wooden stake at the head of the bed. Jiang Hai casually took it and couldn't help but be surprised, because this thing was actually not corroded, and it was very hard. It looked like it should be metal. After Jiang Hai wiped away the seaweed outside this thing, Jiang Hai found that it was a piece of dark brown metal. When he opened it, it turned out to be a pocket watch. This made Jiang Hai a little surprised. This could be considered an unexpected gain. Of course, the needle in the pocket watch had long stopped working. There was not even a glass cover on it, so it didn't look very valuable. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.